I don't have necessarily a problem with taking the power away from the president to remove sanctions. But a good percentage of the bill is also very awful, such as the parts that talk about sanctioning anybody supporting the government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. But I just want to know why exactly Congressman Mark Pocan voted for that bill, and I'll take the question off the air.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, thanks for that question, Jared. Let me just say, I mean, if you look at that bill, the vote was unbelievably lopsided.
I think there were 6 votes in the House against it and 2 in the Senate. If I'm remembering correctly?
And the reason being is, we originally had a vote in the Senate that we were really trying to make sure we get the sanctions on Russia because clearly the president, even as he signed it, said he thinks it might be unconstitutional, which, again, this is a guy who's just doing everything he can to subvert what we're trying to do to put some pressure on Russia since they interfered with our elections. I mean, clearly we have to have a response in that way, not starting a Cold War. I mean, there are some clearly who do want to do that, right? Some of the Republican senators as they talk about this, but the vast majority of Congress doesn't want that. So rather than getting lost on what this bill maybe could do, I can tell you that a lot of thought went into the additional provisions. I was one of the people on the whip team to make sure that we could deal with the Iranian deal. I would never do anything that would put that at risk. We've got a president who I think continually wants to put that at risk. So we put some very careful language that they needed to add to get it out of the House, but we needed to have the sanctions in place for Russia, and quite honestly, North Korea needed something as well. Sanctions, don't forget, we belong diplomatic solutions rather than military solutions. If we didn't do it, we might very likely be waiting for this administration to very unpredictably do military action, and then we're really in trouble. So I think that's why you saw such a giant lopsided vote. And, I'm still not sure the president's going to live by it. He may have signed it, but, let's face it, following everything with Russia, we know he's got something to hide, and he's going to continue to do everything he can to make sure it's not exposed.
Yeah, it seems that way. Refusing to release his tax returns and everything else. He added a signing statement to it, basically saying, I think this is unconstitutional. Does that make any sense?
No, I mean, so that's the thing. Everything he does, from the lies most recently about him dictating the description of what his son's meeting was with Russian officials, where his lawyer said it didn't happen. Now we're finding out it did. There's so many lies out of this administration, mostly and largely around Russia. I mean, I'm a simple guy from Wisconsin, but it doesn't pass the smell test, where I come from. If it doesn't pass the smell test, there's probably something that stinks. And this stinks. And I think when you see something like this.
This is it. Hey, Thom Hartmann here with the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm serious about my health.
Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Middays with Mark hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls on the topics of the day. And Dan in Oceanside, California, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Tom, I love everything you do. Congressman, thank you for spending the time with us. There's a H.R. Bill 2366, which would allow being able to discharge a student loan through bankruptcy once again. Is there any chance of that ever seeing the light of day?
Dan, thanks for your question. This is an issue that I don't quite understand why there's a disconnect between the parties, because to me, some of the stuff around student debt should be a no-brainer. I introduced the first bill back in 2013 to allow people to refinance student debt. People are paying 6.6% interest when the current rate was around 3.5%, and it just doesn't make sense that you can refinance your home and your car but not your student loan. Some of these other issues, like you brought up, HR 2366 and some other measures, should be pretty much nonpartisan, no-brainer. If people do get a higher education, the odds are they're going to make more money, which means they're going to pay more taxes, and there's a lot of benefits to it. Yet, for some reason, it's been really hard to get people on the other side of the aisle to join in. Now, Elizabeth Warren has done a refinancing bill. Senator Gillibrand from New York has done a refinancing bill. Mine is the only one that does have some bipartisan support, but I think we're only talking 3 or 4 Republicans on the bill. It's just been difficult, Dan, and I don't quite know why that they're seeing this as a disconnect. I know some of the rhetoric that I used to hear on the budget committee around this was that they just don't want everyone following the path of college, and we know not everyone does. 30% of people do, and the other 70% don't. But I don't understand why this issue hasn't been something that to gain more support. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Dan, because it doesn't make sense to me either.
Michael in Troy, New York. Hey, Michael, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks, Tom, longtime listener, first-time caller, and Congressman Pocan. Great to talk to you. And I actually retweeted your comment about the wall earlier today. My question has to do with agency confirmation and Senate confirmations. We're hearing speculation that the president might move one secretary from one agency to the other, and I guess I'm confused. Is there a blanket approval that once you're approved for one department head, you can easily be moved, or will this require additional confirmation by the Senate? And how does that not, what about their qualifications if they're going from vastly different agencies? I'm confused.
Yeah, Michael, great question. And, I actually listened to part of yesterday's press conference where the press person reiterated that they would not be moving Jeff Sessions to Homeland because that was one of the speculation, right? And then there also was another speculation. They said that they didn't know if there was a move in works. The question is, I think, a fear that he'll try to do a recess appointment while people are out and put someone in. But, there's supposed to be a confirmation process. I don't think you can automatically go from one to another. That's why, you still would have to have normal Senate confirmation. But what we're really watching, and we all should be watching, is that he does anything to pull Jeff Sessions from Attorney General so he can put someone else in who could fire Mueller, who's doing a really, I think, great job on the investigation he's working on. So
that's the theory, isn't it? That he's going to move Sessions from to replace Kelly over to DHS.
They gave us yesterday in the press briefing. And usually, they give you wiggle room on it. This one was no wiggle room, that it's not going to happen, they're saying. But again, with this administration, I don't trust much of what they say. Yeah. So that's what we're really watching, because I know he is desperate to put someone in as Attorney General who will get rid of Mueller, again, because of the Russia investigation.
Yeah, indeed. Mike in El Paso, Texas. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Congressman. Want to say thanks to both of you for serving the public so well as you do and speaking up for the truth.
Thanks,
Congressman. I just wanted to know. It just seems like with every day we have more and more volumes of things coming forth about the corruptness and the criminality of this president. And I know Bob Mueller's a good man, and he is utilizing all the tools at his disposal to try to uncover everything, but there may be so much you might not ever get to the end of it. So I guess my question is, when are we going to have enough where we're going to actually start seeing either impeachment proceedings or, in my view, better yet, criminal indictment before this guy can continue to advance his agenda even further, which seems to be headed for calamity?
Yeah, Mike, great questions. Let me say it this way. We're going to need the Republicans to put their country before their party in order to do something while they're in control. Quite honestly, Paul Ryan needs to grow a spine. He used to stand up to the president during the campaigns, and now he rolls over and gets his belly rubbed, and that seems to be where we're at with the House of Representatives leadership. To get something like impeachment to really get what this independent counsel that we want, you're going to have Republicans step up to do that. And it may be that if we can't get to that crucial point where he just pushes them over the edge, we have the November 18 elections coming up. And I think there's a reason why we have Democrats announced in over 200 of the Republican districts already, and they have Republicans announced in Democratic districts in something like 20. It's like a fraction of where we're at, because people really are upset about what's going on, and that may be the best opportunity to push something forward. I would hope that they'll rise to put the country before their party, but unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of it happen in Washington, and really that's extremely discouraging. As someone who actually believes in the process enough to run for office and serve in office, you'd expect that you might be able to get that done, and so far, unfortunately, it's not working. Yeah,
we just have a little less than a minute, or a little more than a minute until the next break, Congressman. Not enough time to put a caller on, and it's a hard break at the bottom of the hour. So, quick question: we had Iron Stash on this show yesterday. And I'm sorry I don't have my one sheet in front of me. I think I remember his name, but I don't want to get it.
Randy Bryce.
Randy Bryce. There we go. He was talking about you coming into the district. He sat through at least one of the town halls you did for on behalf of Paul Ryan, and he spoke very well of you. I was wondering your thoughts on him.
Yeah, he's been to a couple of them. I'll tell you, this is the first honest-to-goodness, real challenge Paul Ryan has had in my memory. That my hometown is in that district. My husband's family lives in that district. I know that district second to my own, and Randy fits the district like a glove. He's an iron worker. That's a district that's been largely deindustrialized. They lost 14,000 auto jobs in Kenosha, about 10,000 in Janesville. This is a guy who can talk to people at a very authentic, real level, and I think he's a very serious candidate. And if he has the resources, I think he could give the speaker a run for his money. This is the speaker who wants to get rid of health care for tens of millions of people that aren't asking for it, and Randy's the antidote.
Yeah, and he's plain spoken, very straightforward, and yet has clearly a sophisticated grasp of the issues. I was just really impressed. So
yeah, no, he's exactly what we need in Congress.
Yeah, amen. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back right after this break at the bottom of the hour with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. Stick around. By the way, his website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He is also the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Right after this break, we'll be back with more of your calls in our Middays with Mark hour. Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jeffrey Sachs' new book, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. This is the preface. The foreword to the book, by the way, was written by Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump, this is from the preface, though, by Jeffrey Sachs. Donald Trump becomes president of a nation that is deeply divided by class, race, health, and opportunity. In his acceptance speech, Trump pledged to be the president for all Americans. He also gave a very promising hint of how to pursue that objective in practice. Trump is a real estate developer, so it's not surprising that his brief acceptance speech was dominated by the idea of rebuilding, a word he mentioned 4 times. And then here's the quote. Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream. We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, and hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it. End of quote from Trump. This is a valid, indeed uplifting perspective. America desperately needs rebuilding. Its infrastructure is decrepit. Its energy system is out of date for a climate-threatened economy. Its coastal areas are already showing grave vulnerability to rising sea levels and extreme storms. Its Rust Belt cities like Grand Rapids, Michigan are boarded up. Its inner cities across the country are unhealthy for the people being raised in them. Rebuilding America's cities and creating a 21st century infrastructure could be Trump's greatest legacy. Trump's pledge to make America's infrastructure second to none is a correct and bold goal for America's competitiveness, future job creation, public health, and well-being. Yet, as I will explain in this book, America today is certainly no longer second to none. On a recent Sustainable Development Goals Index, the United States ranked 22nd out of 34 high-income countries. For Americans returning from foreign travel, a well-known sign that they've touched down at home is that the elevators, escalators, and moving walkways of our once proud airports are out of order. A builder president could indeed help to restore vitality to the U.S. economy and put millions of people to work in the process. All of the major candidates in the 2016 presidential campaign pledged a major effort to rebuild America's infrastructure. Indeed, Trump suggested a hefty price tag of $1 trillion, which is a realistic sum and target for the coming 5 years, roughly 1% of national income every year. The keys to success in building a new American economy can be summarized in 3 words: smart, fair, and sustainable. A smart economy means deploying the best of cutting-edge technology. Our energy grid should be smart and economizing on energy use and incorporating distributed energy sources, such as wind and solar power, into the grid. Our transport system should be smart in enabling self-driving electric vehicles within our cities and 21st century high-speed rail between them. A fair economy would start with Trump's pledge to rebuild the inner cities. Such a pledge should include affordable housing, decent urban public schools and public health facilities, efficient transport services for low-income communities, parks and green spaces in places now burdened by urban blight, the cleanup of urban toxic dumps, comprehensive recycling rather than landfill, and safe water for all Americans, so that the water drinking disaster that afflicts Flint, Michigan, and similar crises elsewhere are brought to a rapid end and never recur. A sustainable economy means acknowledging and anticipating the dire environmental threats facing America's cities and infrastructure. The vulnerability of New Orleans levees had been predicted by scientists and engineers long before Hurricane Katrina. The flooding of New York City had been predicted long before Hurricane Sandy. The risks ahead to the United States in the event of unchecked climate change can be found in countless scientific and policy studies, such as Risky Business and the National Climate Assessment. Much could go wrong in an undirected building boom that is not smart, fair, and sustainable. Trump's campaign pledges to restore the Keystone XL pipeline and U.S. coal production are cases in point. Investing in a boom in fossil fuels would be an expensive dead end. Such projects will inevitably be closed soon after they are completed, if not in a Trump administration, then in the ones that follow. They are simply untenable environmentally, no matter where the lobbyists assert, no matter what the lobbyists assert. Billions of dollars would be thrown down the drain to develop resources that will never be used. It's funny that climate deniers are chortling about the incoming Trump administration. Nature doesn't care what they think, and neither do the 192 other countries on the planet that signed the recent Paris Climate Agreement. Fossil fuel companies can spend money developing unusable resources, but they would be throwing money down the mine shaft, as would the investors buying the bonds financing such hapless projects. Trump made another very important pledge in his acceptance speech that should underpin a successful strategy for building a new American economy. He said, "I will harness the creative talents of our people, and we will call upon our best and brightest to leverage their tremendous talent for the benefit of all." America has nearly 5,000 colleges and universities across the country, including every congressional district. And with the finest collection of engineering and scientific faculty, this is Jeffrey Sachs now talking, faculty and knowledge in the world. These institutions of higher learning have schools of public policy, social work, public health, business administration, and environmental science. Most importantly, they have 21 million young Americans enrolled to gain expertise in the skills needed for leadership and skills for the 21st century. By harnessing the vast brain power and experience in our colleges and universities, in civil society and business, America could indeed enter an era of successful rebuilding, one that creates a smart, fair, and sustainable economy that is truly second to none and serves as an inspiration for other parts of the world. This is from Jeffrey Sachs. He wrote it in November of 2016, just right after the election, before the inauguration. The book, Building the New American Economy. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. It's our Middays with Mark Hour. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, congressman representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan, on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. And Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks, Tom. Mr. Pocan, I wanted to ask, if you talk to your colleagues in the House, what you guys are going to do if he goes through with this threat of taking your health care away from you in the Senate, because that sounds like a pretty stiff threat. And I thought Obamacare, he can't stop making payments on it. It's in the bill. Have you had a comment on that? Have you talked about that, about when he takes your health care away?
Yeah, Russell, thanks for your question. So, first of all, how to win friends and influence people, generally taking away the health care of the Republicans you're trying to get the votes for, it would not be the recommended course. So, I think the problem is he just gets mad, right? And he tweets or he bursts out with some kind of a response that he never plans on actually executing. I think the real question is, when are they going to get with us to fix what needs to be fixed? Because clearly the House did a terrible vote. They took that would take away health care from tens of millions of people and make older Americans pay more. And really, it was all about a big tax break for the wealthiest and for insurance companies and big pharma. But, they're desperate to just check a box that they got rid of Obamacare, and they need this money to start their tax reform, what they really want to do, which is take care of their wealthy donors and the wealthy companies in this country. So, whenever we need, what we're trying to focus on, and I think you're starting to see this, the Help Us committee, the subcommittee in the Senate is looking at doing some bipartisan conversations. You've got to at least keep the Affordable Care Act going. You have to keep those amounts that get paid to the insurance company that's subsidized to make sure that people have health insurance so people don't lose it. I'm seeing some movement there. I'm hoping at some point that'll break through. I've been really disappointed in Paul Ryan, once again saying the House won't do anything different. We've already voted on it, rather than recognizing that their plan is a failure. But again, I think a lot of it's bravado by the president, desperate to have a win, to check a box that he got rid of Obamacare, and to start the tax cuts for the wealthiest. And, you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric between now and then. I think it's tough to get a lot of the Republicans to go that much against their constituents enough in some of these swing districts. So we've got promise. We just have to keep the pressure on. People have to keep calling their members of Congress.
Bob in San Luis Obispo, California. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. Congressman, there was a very lengthy, detailed article in Vanity Fair about the sheer ineptitude of the Trump administration simply going into the Department of Energy, not talking about all the other departments. And, the first people they sent over there didn't even have the necessary security clearance to be briefed. Is there anything that holds this administration accountable for not staffing the government agencies to the levels that has always been the normal way of doing things?
And if I could add to that, I've seen reports that Rick Perry did not realize that the Department of Energy was in charge of our nuclear stockpile, our nuclear weapons, when he took it over. Could that have something to do with the problem, or were those just snarky fake news stories? I frankly don't know. Congressman?
No, my guess is from Rick Perry that is true. Not exactly a confidence builder, is it? I do see this across all departments. We're having a problem that he has not made the appointments of political leaders in these areas across the board. So while they're complaining the Senate hasn't approved some of the people they put out there, some for good reason, you have to have a review. They haven't filled a number of these positions, and for the first time ever, we're seeing this where generally what doesn't get interfered with during all the politics of policy is the casework we can do for constituents, helping them navigate federal agencies. We're starting to have problems there in our office that we never had before, simply because they're not making the appointments they need to. So I don't know if some of it is just incompetence by, again, the Trump administration, because we've seen plenty of it. I don't know if some of it might be intentional in some agencies to slow walk it, but it's becoming a problem across the board that we're seeing. And, I think that's going to be an issue pretty soon that will rise to the level that Republicans are going to see this as well in Congress, that they can't get casework done for their constituents.
Marcia in Englewood, Florida. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. It's so good to see you.
Hey, Marcia.
There's a couple issues. I know that they're going to start working on the tax code. I don't know when, but it's on their minds now. There's a couple issues in the tax code that really bug me something awful. The first one is every time one of these big corporations gets hit with a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar fine, they're allowed to deduct that on their taxes. Am I correct?
I'm not sure about every fining. I couldn't say that definitively.
I think it's just incredible that not only don't these people that do actually criminal offenses against the American people, they don't go to jail, but they can deduct the cost of those penalties, however many billions they were charged, they can apply to their taxes as a tax break. That's one tax break that I totally disapprove of. Another one is when I was a working person, I'm 74, I'll be 75 soon, so I haven't worked in a long time and haven't filed taxes in a long time. But when I did file taxes, my medical bills had to reach such an astronomical amount in the last few tax filings of my working experience that I couldn't deduct them. I could not deduct my medical expenses because they did not reach the threshold. I don't see why people earning less than, let's say, $250,000 have some crazy threshold that they have to meet of medical expenses in order to be able to include them in their tax deductions. Those are two things that really boil me.
Congress?
Sure. No, I hear you, Marcia. And the first one, I'd have to check, because I don't know if I could say that of all fines, they're all deductible. Like, for some reason, I think they're not from something I've heard, but I just don't have that information handy to offer up. What I can tell you is, they desperately want to reduce taxes on the wealthiest and on corporations. The goal that they want to reduce the corporate weight way down because we have one of the highest in the country, allegedly. The problem is that's on paper, but when you take all the different exemptions that are out there, like you've mentioned, the effective rate really is more like 16, 17, 18%, somewhere in there, which is about half of what the actual rate is. So I can tell you this. I think it's going to be it's very difficult for them to really get in there and do this because every group that's fought for an exemption doesn't want to give it up to lower the rate. It's going to be a giant political fight. If they thought health care was difficult, I guarantee tax reform will be more difficult. But that's part of why the initial so-called health care bill they put out there had that giant tax cut to start what they're trying to get towards in relieving taxes for, quite honestly, it's their donors and their voters, the wealthiest in this country, and not for everyone else. So I think, there's a lot of individual tax deductions we could point to as absurd, but more we have to be careful of what they're trying to do, which is they'll give us a penny or maybe a nickel in tax breaks for the middle class and those aspiring to be in the middle class, and then all the real money will go towards the wealthiest and for big corporations, and that's not the direction we need to do on the tax code.
Todd in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, go Marcia. I like what she had to say first off, and thank you both. Hey, real quick, Randy Bryce, what is the DCCC doing to support him? Because in the past, they have always had a hands-off approach to Paul Ryan and just kind of let him continuously get reelected. There's been no effort to put forth a Democratic candidate, and this guy is coming from the grassroots effort. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So generally, and generally means there's exceptions to the rule, but generally the DCCC doesn't get involved when there's primaries. Technically, there is still one other person in the primary in Randy's race. However, having said that, NARAL, for instance, today endorsed Randy Bryce. I think that came out as a release. He's getting, SEIU, the momentum is all on his side. The Progressive Caucus made our first endorsement being Randy Bryce. A lot of other big organizations have as well. So I think our conversations with the D-Trip have been not so much, I think, that they're trying to stay away from Paul Ryan, but that, in some cases where there's someone who's clearly going to be so far ahead of anyone else in a race, and like in this case, it's a real race with a real candidate, they should probably pay attention. So that's kind of the conversations that many of us have had with the DCCC. It's not so much that they've left Paul Ryan alone as they didn't see it as a winnable seat because of some previous candidates, or there could have been a primary and they don't, again, they're not supposed to generally get involved in primaries. We're trying to make a case that Randy is the real thing. This is a real race. This is a guy who's not in his district very often. He wrote a health care bill that is going to take away health care from tens of millions of people.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your questions for Congressman Mark Pocan in our Middays with Mark Hour right after this. And welcome back. Bob in Davenport, Iowa, watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Mark, I want to thank you for introducing the Voter Roll Integrity Act.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm working hard to find co-sponsors across the country and to see about getting some people in the Senate to sponsor one. I've had some conversation with Bernie Sanders' office about that, and hopefully he may do something. But I really see this as the way to save our democracy, and I think you'll probably agree. But I'm trying to imagine like what the opposition might drum up as opposing arguments to the Voter Roll Integrity Act.
Oh, they'll probably claim, Bob, my guess is the same reason why they did interstate cross-check to begin with, right? That somehow there's people voting more than once, and we've got to get rid of the people. You remember, I mean, to this day, Donald Trump is still claiming illegal voters were more than the 3 million votes he lost by because he's desperate to claim he actually won the election. They'll do something along those lines. I think what we need to do is just show the facts that it's been proven that they've dumped people off of the voter rolls that were incorrectly dumped over and over and over again, and that really this was an attempt to do just that, to dump a bunch of legal voters off that they thought weren't going to be their voters. So I think we just need to keep taking those facts and figures out there and try to get more sponsors for the bill and get the word out on this. But I agree with you. I mean, those democracy issues are really at the core, because if we don't have a democracy, a lot of these other issues are definitely going to go down for us, from tax reform to health care to infrastructure and everything else. It's important that everyone be able to vote who can vote, and that we don't set up artificial barriers that we see right now set up across the country.
Rick in San Jose, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Congressman Pocan, thank you for all that you're doing. I'm very pleased to know that there are still representatives out there like you, and I'm hoping that there'll be many, many more. I am calling about the Democratic overall strategy for 2018, 2020, and beyond that I think should be immediate, aggressive, and broadcast very loudly every single day starting right now, because I'm in terror of what's coming up in 2018 and then 2020 with the census and all that. Where, other than Nancy Pelosi's statement, where is the huge Democratic immediate plan to bring back my country?
Yeah, Rick, so this is one where I am optimistic. I think something I've seen that I'm encouraged by is that the congressional Democrats and the senatorial Democrats are on the same page, understanding that at the core, we need to have a good, strong economic message, and that much will go from there. In Wisconsin, we had a 200,000 Democratic voter drop-off in the presidential election, second only to Mississippi. And we used to be one of the top 3 for turnout states. But we didn't have a good core economic message in 2016, and we had a lot of voters who stayed home. So the fact that the better deal proposal that's been put forward by Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on behalf of Democrats in the House and the Senate really gets at a lot of those core economic issues, that if we can re-engage with voters that we are there fighting for the middle class and those aspiring to be in the middle class, and we can explain everything from antitrust to wages and all the rest, I think we can make that case.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls right after. More of them right after this. Welcome back. It's our Middays with Mark Hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. And Tony in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan. Tony? Tony's not listening to his phone. You got to listen to your phone. Gizmo in driving through Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Actually, driving through Ohio, but that's okay. I'm a trucker somewhere in America. I'm definitely a Bernie-crat, Congressman, and I was just curious here. Now, you've got a caucus in the Congress and one in the Senate trying to fix the ACA at this point. Are you a member of the Congressional Caucus to fix the ACA now?
Well, I understand Democrats in general, we have said we're willing to sit down if they'll bring us to sit down because we have plenty of ideas and suggestions. Some, they're going to be a little more progressive, like having a public option that I don't know if the Republicans will go for, but a lot of other ones. There's a subcommittee in the Senate, the HELP subcommittee, that Senator Patty Murray and Lamar Alexander are the chair and the ranking on, that are working on something. And then there's this no labels, what do they call themselves, Problem Solvers Caucus, that allegedly is working on it, but Paul Ryan's already said they're not going to look at any new proposals. We're sticking with it. So the activity is on the Senate right now, unless Paul Ryan suddenly decides he's going to stand up to the president, which I don't see happening. So what we're really watching is those conversations that they're having over August. But we have said at any time we are willing to sit down and have a real dialogue about what needs to be fixed around the ACA so that tens of millions of people don't lose health insurance. And we're still open to do that. We, the Democratic Party? Yes. And so there isn't a specific caucus within the Democratic Party devoted to health care? No. I mean, I think what the gentleman's referring to in the last week, there's been news about the HELP subcommittee in the Senate, and that there's this Problem Solvers, No Label caucus that's generally of people who are in competitive districts who are trying to show they work across the aisle, working on something. However, again, it's not Paul Ryan has been very clear that they're not going to do anything different in the House. So all the action really would be in the Senate, and they still haven't done their vote. So that's what we're watching the closest. Okay. Tom in Towson, Maryland, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
All right, so because what Trump was made from society, how are you going to fix it with reform?
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again, Tom? I got a little, it went out for a second. Right.
So because Trump is a result of society, what is your plan to fix?
Tom, do you mean like many of Trump's behaviors are reflections of dysfunction in our culture? So how can you fix that without fixing our culture? Is that your question?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I mean, first of all, I don't really feel that Donald Trump is reflective of the country, at least as I see it and the people I talk to. I think there's an element, right? We know when Barack Obama got elected, we had a part of it was this anti-government part of the Tea Party, and part of it was outright racism that created the Tea Party, and that's been really our huge downfall since 2010. I think Donald Trump really was reflective, of this kind of populist, xenophobic, some people feel like they're losing grasp of being in power in this country. That's a big element of what he has, but that's not the majority of the country. That's why he can do pretty much anything and hold on to 35 or 36%, but not much more than that. And the rest of the people are concerned that the direction he's taking us is directionless, and it's more based on, some ideas that pop into his head or he tweets out. So, again, I don't think I agree with the premise that he's reflective of society. Certainly there are some in society who don't like the fact that our culture is changing and maybe different people will be in power in the future, and they don't want to give up for white males, but I don't see him as really representative of the majority of society.
James in Orlando, West Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Thank you, Mr. Pocan. You're doing a great service for your country. I'm a disabled Vietnam veteran, and I'm sitting here looking at the VFW magazine. On page 12, the Trump administration is going to cut the benefits to 225,000 vets. It don't look good for us. I know. I guarantee you those vets had to fight every inch of the way for their benefits. And it says here they're going to take, let me see this, $3.2 billion away from these vets next year. That's going to really hurt us. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I'll tell you, James, if I can offer maybe a little more general, because this is something we've seen happen even pre-Donald Trump. So this is the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is symptomatic of it as well. They don't believe in public institutions, so they want to take money from the VA system and put it, for example, towards choice is what they call it, but it's taking money away from a system that works well for veterans and saying you can go to other doctors with it. But every time you take away that benefit, that institution that we provide that benefit for, the more we risk providing those benefits. So I think that's been something that happened even pre-Donald Trump, that there's always lip service, right, about veterans. But we don't, let's face it, we don't pay people well in the military compared to all the military contractors. And then we often don't want to take care of people after they've put their service in for this country. And we're seeing that slide happen again. So I guess I'd just say, James, it's not unique to Donald Trump. It's kind of symptomatic of the current Republican Party, and that's why we need to push back. Even my Tea Party uncle, after he goes through all the complaints about the federal government, he usually ends it with, "But leave my VA alone." We need to protect those benefits for people who served us.
Yeah. Congressman, we have just a minute and 15 seconds or thereabouts until the end of the hour. Your thoughts on what's coming up that we should be paying attention to, what the pressure points might be, where we should be calling our members of Congress, the big things that we should be looking for going forward and doing for them?
Yeah, I think for this month, because it is the month we're not around, we've got to be afraid of what could happen without Congress around. So is that any of those recess appointments, and be ready to act? And I know the indivisible groups, for example, in this area, they're so organized. I love it. They put out something. If announcement happens before 2 p.m., there's a rally at 5 o'clock that day. If the announcement happens after 2, it's the next day at a certain time. They're getting ready for it. We need to be ready for that. And we need to be ready for whatever might happen on health care in case they try to pull something really fast by calling the Senate in. Let's just remember, even though it's allegedly the congressional recess, we've got to watch it even closer so they don't pull something fast on us. Be ready to contact your members of Congress. Be ready to act.
I have heard stories that in order to prevent, Trump from, for example, firing Jeff Sessions and then recess appointing somebody to replace him immediately, which he could do if the Senate goes into recess, that the Senate specifically was, whether it was Mitch McConnell being upset with Trump or whether it was Chuck Schumer, forcing it, might not go into recess. You know anything about that?
I just assume they're assuming the same thing. With this president, anything could happen, and we got to be vigilant.
So they're going to cover their backsides. Fascinating. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course, Tom. Thank you.
It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you. Congressman Mark Pocan, you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, his website, pocan.house.gov. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Democracy in Chains, The Deep History of the Radical Right's Stealth Plan for America. It really is a deep history. It's brilliant. This is from the introduction. As 1956 drew to a close, Colgate Whitehead Darden Jr., the president of the University of Virginia, feared for the future of his beloved state. The previous year, the U.S. Supreme Court had issued its second Brown versus Board of Education ruling, calling for the dismantling of segregation in public schools with, quote, all deliberate speed. In Virginia, outraged state officials responded with legislation to force the closure of any school that planned to comply. Some extremists called for ending public education entirely. Darden, who earlier in his career had been the governor, could barely stand to contemplate the damage such a rash move would inflict. Even the name of this plan, Massive Resistance, made his gentlemanly Virginia sound like Mississippi. On his desk was a proposal written by a man who had recently been appointed chair of the economics department at the University of Virginia. 37-year-old James McGill Buchanan likes to call himself a Tennessee country boy, but Darden knew better. No less a figure than Milton Friedman had extolled Buchanan's potential. As Darden reviewed the document, he might have wondered if the newly hired economist had read his mind. For without mentioning the crisis at hand, Buchanan's proposal put in writing what Darden was thinking. Virginia needed to find a better way to deal with the incursion on states' rights represented by Brown versus Board of Education. To most Americans living in the North, Brown was a ruling to end segregated schools, nothing more, nothing less. And Virginia's response was about race. But to men like Darden and Buchanan, two well-educated sons of the South who were dedicated to the idea of, to its model of political economy, Brown voted a sea change on much more. At a minimum, federal courts could no longer be counted on to defer reflexively to states' rights arguments. More concerning was the likelihood that the High Court would be more willing to intervene when presented with compelling evidence that a state action was in violation of the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection under the law. States' rights, in effect, were yielding in preeminence to individual rights. It was not difficult for either Darden or Buchanan to imagine how a court might now rule if presented with the evidence of the state of Virginia's archaic labor relations, its measures to suppress voting, or its efforts to buttress the power of reactionary rural whites by underrepresenting the moderate voters of the cities and suburbs of Northern Virginia. Federal meddling could rise to levels once unimaginable. James McGill Buchanan was not a member of the Virginia elite, nor is there any explicit evidence to suggest that for a white Southerner of his day, he was uniquely racist or insensitive to the concept of equal treatment. And yet somehow, all he saw in the Brown decision was coercion. And not just in the abstract, but the court ruling represented to him was personal. Northern liberals, the very people who looked down on Southern whites like him, he was sure, were now going to tell his people how to run their society. And to add insult to injury, he and people like him with property were now no doubt going to be taxed more to pay for all the improvements that were now deemed necessary and proper for the state to make. What about his rights? Where did the federal government get the authority to engineer society to its liking and then send him the bill? Who represented their interests in all this? I can fight this, he concluded. I want to fight this. Find the resources, he proposed to Darden, for me to create a new center on the campus of the University of Virginia, and I will use this center to create a new school of political economy and social philosophy. It would be an academic center, rigorously so, but one with a quiet political agenda to defeat the perverted form of liberalism that sought to destroy their way of order, of life, a social order as he described it, to promote a social order as he described it, built on individual liberty, a term with its own coded meaning, but one that Darden surely understood. The center Buchanan promised would train a line of new thinkers in how to argue against those seeking to impose an increasing role of government in economic and social life. He could win this war, and he would do it with ideas. While it's hard for most of us today to imagine how Buchanan or Darden or any other reasonable, rational human being saw the racially segregated Virginia of the 1950s as a society built on the rights of the individual, in quotes, no matter how that term was defined, it is not hard to see why the Brown decision created a sense of grave risk among those who did believe that. Buchanan fully understood the scale of the challenge he was undertaking and promised no immediate results, but he made clear that he would devote himself passionately to this cause. Some may argue that while Darden fulfilled his part, he found the money to establish the center, he never got much in return. Buchanan's team had no discernible success in decreasing the federal government's pressure on the South all the way through the 60s and 70s. But take a longer view, follow the story forward to the second decade of the 21st century, and a different picture emerges, one that is both a testament to Buchanan's intellectual powers and at the same time the utterly chilling story of the ideological origins of the single most powerful and least understood threat to democracy today, the attempt by the billionaire-backed radical right to undo democratic governance. For what becomes clear as the story moves forward decade by decade is that a quest that began as a quiet attempt to prevent the state of Virginia from having to meet national democratic standards for fair treatment and equal protection under the law would, some 60 years later, become the veritable opposite of itself, a stealth bid to reverse engineer all of America. Democracy in chains.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, You can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with me is Dave McCullough, partner with Capital Media Partners, conservative. His Twitter handle is DT McCullough, McCullouch.
OCH, almost.
I got it right?
OCH.
That's what I said.
You said you. It's all right.
Okay.
McCullough like the chainsaw.
Nobody
gets that.
ULLOCH.
There you go.
Okay. There we go. Well, that's funny. I'm hearing a funny little beeping. Oh, it must be your phone in my IFB. Anyhow, Dave, frequently debates me on television, and here you are in our radio studio. Nice to have you here with us, Dave.
Good to hear it. Yeah. Good to be here.
So I wanted to talk about solar power. Kate Aronoff wrote a great piece for The Guardian today. The headline is "Utility Companies Won't Let You Sell Your Own Solar Power." Why not? The electric utility sector is broken, but the transformation we need will be virtually impossible so long as a handful of wealthy elites are calling the shots. And they point out that the electric utilities spent $114 million last year lobbying to end net metering. That is the ability of people who put solar panels on their houses to sell electricity back into the grid. And so far this year, they've spent $59.9 million. Now that if you look at Germany, which has, in fact, generated more than half of their electricity one day this summer from solar power because they incentivized people to put solar panels on their rooftops with what was called the 100,000 Rooftop Program, originally designed to replace one nuclear power plant. It grew so fast it replaced 10 nuclear power plants in the first 10 years, and they had to stop the subsidies because they just couldn't until they could upgrade the grid, which they did. And now it's like just off to the races. Germany is the cloudiest country in Europe. Germany is north of Michigan, latitude-wise. It's Canada, latitude-wise. And it is as cloudy as Michigan, which is one of the cloudiest states in the United States. And yet, they're generating half their power on a good day from solar power and doing it very, very successfully. Why should we allow the oligarchs who own the for-profit utilities in the United States to say, no, you can't do that?
Well, first of all, they built the grid. They built each power company's grid, which ultimately connects to all the other grids.
They did it on our public space, and they did it with Fifth Amendment takings, with what's it called, eminent domain takings. That we gave them the permission to do that. We gave them the land to do that. So don't they have some obligation to us?
I think they certainly do have an obligation as a public utility to provide power in exchange for money. Now, certainly, I agree that net metering is a general plus. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that we have the ability to make our own solar, and there's incentives. Typically, I believe in market-based incentives rather than government incentives, but it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. The challenge, and I want to take a little note about that lobbying figure. You said $100-something million was spent on lobbying against net metering. No, that was just in general. For the energy industry. And there's no doubt there's a lot of concern about the transmission lines. Our infrastructure has a lot of problems, a lot of challenges. We've seen rolling blackouts in California years ago. We've seen...
Now, that was a scam by a for-profit company. Enron did that, and they shut down power plants to create those blackouts to take down Governor Gray Davis, which they successfully did. And Ken Lay had a secret meeting with Arnold Schwarzenegger about a year before this all happened. When Darrell Issa found out about it at a press conference, he broke down in tears, you'll recall, because he thought he was going to be the next governor. I mean, shouldn't we say enough with these private companies? About half the, just to set the frame, about half the electricity in the United States is generated by publicly owned utilities. And publicly owned utilities, by and large, are very, very aggressively encouraging people to solarize, put up windmills, whatever, you know, get into the grid, get on the grid. The private companies see this, rightfully so, as a threat. The public companies are committed first to serving the people. The private companies are committed first to making a profit. Shouldn't there not be a profit in something that is the commons, that is essential, literally essential to life, electricity in the United States?
That becomes a slippery slope then. I mean, at what point does a utility or a utility be socialized? It's crazy to think. A lot of people think now that internet is a public utility, and the government has actually started to make rules. I mean, net neutrality is one of those things as well. At what point do we say, okay, well, all utilities then, if it's for the common good, should be government owned? I don't think if you start doing that at a certain point, you're going to end up just an entirely socialized country.
First of all, let's redefine terms here. It's not government owned; it's owned by we the people, right? I mean, you know, the utilities are typically owned by local towns, counties, or states. And I'm not even sure there's any utilities that are state owned, but usually they're locally owned. They have local boards of governors. Sometimes they're elected, sometimes they're appointed, but they're representative of the people. And you know, in terms of the slippery slope, I would say wherever there is a natural monopoly, wherever you can only get one thing, right? You know, whether it's septic, whether it's water, whether it's electricity, frankly, whether it's the copper coming into your home with broadband. I think that should be regulated as a utility, and ideally, I'm not arguing for the nationalization of the internet, you know, of individual ISPs, although I could make that argument, but I'm not. But with regard to electricity, water, and septic, you know, the just core stuff essential to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we know, and we now know, I mean, there's just a pile of evidence that doing this on a for-profit basis not only doesn't produce the best outcome, but produces the most expensive outcome. So shouldn't we ban that? I got no problem with saying let's just nationalize these. It wouldn't be nationalized; it would be localizing them. But you know, I was living in Portland, Oregon, when the city of Portland tried to buy PG&E, which was not the whole West Coast, just Oregon. They tried to buy their local utility from Enron, and Enron was asking, I forget the amount. Let's say it was $5 million. It was probably 50 or 500 or whatever. But they had an asking price, publicly stated. The city of Portland said, we will pay you the asking price. And Ken Lay said, we are going to refuse to sell to any government agency. We will only sell to another for-profit corporation.
Right. They're in to make money. I mean, that's I'm not sure if that's a problem or what. But if
it was
the government came to me and said, well, Dave, you know, we want to buy your house.
Yeah, but your house is not part of the commons. And by the way, the government, in order for the electric company to transmit electricity to my house, they may well have come to you and said, Dave, we're going to buy your house, and we're going to give it to the power company. We're going to give it to Enron and let them run their power lines across it, because we're going to put a transmission line through here.
You know, if the government said, like, we want your thing, whatever that thing is, I would say no, because it's my thing. And the government does not have a right. In some cases, I guess they do with power lines and eminent domain, right. But if I'm in the business of making money, which I am, any business is in the business of making money. That's the point of business.
Shouldn't anything that uses eminent domain, anything where your home and my home can be taken for the public good, doesn't that just imply right off the bat that this is for the public good, that this is a natural monopoly? This is something that should be part of the commons rather than part of the for-profit sphere.
Maybe that can be kind of a theory going forward, where you have new utilities, or you're pushing for new utilities in places that are not currently serviced. But I very much vehemently disagree that the government should be going in and taking over utilities for even an asking a market price.
Why?
It's just not right. It's not right for the government to own and to socialize these things. And whether it's a federal government, a state government, or local government.
I don't understand why. What is the benefit to you and me as consumers of electricity to having for-profit companies, telling us that we can't have solar panels on our houses, which will save us money, telling us, no, we're not going to let you do that. When a government-owned agency would say, please do that. We would love to not have to build another power plant.
And that's going to be the difference, I think, in ideologies. Certainly,
you'd rather pay more in service of the so-called free market?
I'd rather have less government-run things. I mean, the government.
Why?
The government can't run diddly squat correctly.
Oh, that's not true. The post office works great. Nobody's ever missed a Social Security check. The Army is maybe not the most efficient, but
the post office works horribly. Or take a look at metros, Washington's metro system, the subway system here. It's owned by it's run by three different, one entity that is run by the governments of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. All three put money in this thing. And
but the D.C. part of it is those funds are determined by Congress, and the Republicans in Congress have been short funding Metro here in D.C. for over a decade. And as a result of that, the maintenance that was supposed to be done never got done. I mean, I agree with you. If you're going to have a government-owned utility, in this case Metro, at least fund it appropriately.
Funding is important, absolutely. But at the same time, you have government-run things, including not government-run unions, but you have these unions that are causing the metro system to catch on fire on a daily basis. I mean,
unions?
Yeah. The unions are.
You're talking about the union of Republicans in Congress who are cutting the funding to Metro?
No, I'm talking about the unions actually at Metro themselves, keeping on board these people who basically can't be fired for essentially killing people. Metro's defending.
So we've. Oh wow. I think we're wandering far afield.
We probably are. Ideologically, I don't think it's a good idea for more government to be taking over control of things.
Other than a reflexive hatred of government, which would imply a hatred of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and all the people who brought us this government.
There is a role in government. It's not to run utilities.
Why not?
Why?
Because they are not. Because they're answering to you and me rather than answering to stockholders. And, I don't mind if my blue jeans are made by somebody who answers to stockholders. In fact, I think it's the best way, because blue jeans are not part of the commons. But my electricity, I would like to have some say in it.
And if a company says that they don't want to sell to the government, why should they be forced to?
Because you mean they? Wait a minute.
You said in
if
Portland.
A utility does, that was a comment about how Enron was basically echoing your sentiment. We're not going to sell this to the city because we just dislike the idea of publicly owned utilities. Because there's kind of a war going on in the utilities sector right now between public and private, but I still don't understand why you think that if government does it, it's bad. I mean, Shouldn't we? I mean, isn't the whole point of representative democracy to make government work for all of us?
Shouldn't we also try to promote the idea that the free market economy, the thing that this entire country is based on other than democracy, is a good thing? I mean, why do we want to have more government instead of less government? Why don't we want to have more people instead of government running these things?
But because it's better for our country.
Isn't it?
Better for us. Yeah.
When government eventually takes control of our life.
Germany is producing half of their electricity from solar power, and we've got down in Florida they're trying to pass a law to say you can't sell any of your electricity in Florida.
Well, I think it's 42 states as of a couple years ago that allow net metering, and it's a very good thing. I think that it's a good thing to be able to use no power, and then when you need some power, bring it back.
So you're in favor of regulating for-profit utilities to force them to do net metering?
I am in favor of reasonable regulations that make sense for everybody. I'm not in favor of government just willfully taking over everything.
Okay, Dave McCullough, Capital Media Partners. See you in a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
DT McCullough, MCC, ULLOCH, is the Twitter handle. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Tom.
And welcome back. Let's see here. Jack in Derby, Kansas. Hey, Jack, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I've just finished reading your book about the crash of 2016. Maybe we need to change the year on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to. We're going to rewrite that book. There's some great stuff in there, but the crash didn't happen. So yeah.
I really agree
Thanks
with
again,
a lot of your backstory on why we're at where we're at and what we need to do going forward, particularly with renewable energy. And one of the questions I have was that when Nixon took us off the gold standard, we basically became a currency backed by petroleum from the Middle East. And I'm wondering, as countries like Denmark and Germany and Japan and even China are taking active steps to move their energy consumption away from fossil fuels, I'm wondering how that's going to affect our currency going forward, as we seem to be doing nothing proactive to get ahead.
You mean because the world because oil is traded around the world on the dollar?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
If the global demand declines because other countries are being more proactive than us, what happens to our currency, and could that maybe accelerate the crash?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer. I mean, you could game out a couple of scenarios. The possibility that, well, first of all, there's kind of almost two separate things here. One is what's the future of our currency? There's, in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is leading a coalition, or at least they were a year or so ago. I'm assuming it's still going on, to try to use the rial or a basket of currencies instead of the dollar. The Chinese have promoted this idea: use the yuan or renminbi or a basket of currencies that includes the yuan, and they're pushing that really, really hard. Increasingly, countries are trading in commodities, using things other than the dollar. I don't know if that's happening in oil at all. So there's that with regard to the dollar, and I would say that the bottom line is that long term the dollar is set for a decline, and we're seeing the beginning of that right now. With regard to a surplus of oil, that's happening in large part because of fracking in the United States, and we've become the world's largest producer and exporter of oil. I believe we're the largest. We might be the second largest, but we're way up there. And as a result of basically this disruptive technology. So I don't see oil going above $50-$60 a barrel anytime in the near future.
Right. Yeah. With the increased supply and the decreased demand.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the thing. It's so bizarre to watch. Utilities and petro billionaires, just trying to hang on to that last. Please don't let people put solar panels on their houses. We need to sell them oil. Or we need to sell them electricity generated by oil or coal or natural gas, and it's destroying our planet. It's just plain old flat out destroying our planet. So, yeah. Jack, thanks. It's a great question. I'm sorry I don't have clear-cut answers, but it's good stuff to be thinking about and talking about, and trends to watch. I appreciate the call, and thanks for watching us. We'll be right back. It's 22 and a half minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Kyle in Enid, Oklahoma. Hey, Kyle, what's up?
Well, thank you for letting me speak, Tom. I just was listening to your interview, and I one of the questions I would like to ask that gentleman is, what about progress?
Yeah.
Nobody seems to be bringing up progress.
Yeah, isn't it ironic that the for-profit companies are trying to block progress to maintain their profits?
Exactly. I mean, I went out 3 or 4 years ago, and I bought the equivalent of 12 kilowatts of solar panels, 50, 230 some odd watt solar panels. And I bought a Volt. And Tom, I mean, look at it any way you want to look at it. Look at it from a capitalistic standpoint. That's about a 3 to 5% return on my investment.
Whoa.
I'm personally a little scared of the stock market. So that's a way that I can earn more than 0.25% on a CD. And that is as reliable, if not more so, than a CD. I just don't see. I mean, and now with leasing solar panels, if people want to protest Donald Trump, if you can't afford to buy solar panels, lease them. If you can't afford to buy a Volt, lease a Volt or lease an electric car. The payments are so low on leases on these type cars that the fuel savings makes the payment. And that is a way that everybody can participate in some sort of protest against what's going on. Because if you have the desire to do it, there is a way now.
So, Kyle, question. You've got solar panels on your house and you've got an electric car. Are the solar panels enough to fully charge your car? In other words, are you driving your car for free?
Oh, more than free. And see, Oklahoma not only does not allow you to sell, they steal it. They don't give you anything for it.
Really? So you feed power back into the grid there in Oklahoma, and they don't compensate you?
Oh, they've never given me a penny. In fact, in the beginning, I would get a monthly statement that would show that they were in the hole to me. I mean, they owed me money, or they owed me kilowatts.
Right.
And so I never got credited. So I called them, and they said, well, if you don't use that credit in 1 month, you've got 30 days to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. And then they just wiped that out, too, and then just took it all. So even with this, even giving it away, and this is why I'm not that concerned about it. Now, I will say this. My house was total electric, and I did switch the hot water heater over to gas to try to equal out. Sometimes in cloudy winters, I don't zero out. Sure. But this house was on what they call, you'd make the same. When I bought it, the lady that owned it before me was making a $310 electric payment every month. It has a swimming pool. She was making a $310 payment to the electric company every month.
And now yours is zero. So, quick question, Kyle. We're going to hit a break here in just a second. Quick question. Do you have a for-profit utility or a locally owned, community-owned utility?
It's a for-profit. OG&E, Oklahoma Gas and Electric for-profit.
So that's why they're not compensating you for your solar.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, solar power, to sum it up, is a no-brainer. It's the closest thing to a no-brainer I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's as a return on investment, from an environmental standpoint, you name it.
I'm totally with you. And I keep saying, you get these calls from folks going, solar power, this, that, and the other thing. I say, no, it's really nuclear power. There's this giant nuclear reactor 93 million miles away, and we're just absorbing its energy. Kyle, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In fact, it really goes beyond nuclear power. It's even fusion power, which is the coolest kind of nuclear power, right? Shouldn't we all have that? It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jane Mayer's new book, Dark Money, the history of the billionaires behind the rise of the radical right. And it's, by the way, just an extraordinary, astonishing book. This is from chapter 19, sort of the introductory chapter. And she's talking about one of the Koch summits where all these billionaires get together and plan strategy and throw money into the pot and that kind of thing. The highlight of the Koch summit in 2009 was, which, by the way, was the year President Obama's first year in office, was an uninhibited debate about what conservatives should do next in the face of their electoral defeat. As the donors and other guests dined in the hotel's banquet room like Roman senators attending a gladiator duel in the Forum, they watched a passionate argument unfold that encapsulated the stark choice ahead. Sitting on one side of the stage facing the participants was the Texas Senator John Cornyn, the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee and former Justice on the Texas Supreme Court. Poised on the other side of the moderator was the South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, a conservative provocateur who defined the outermost anti-establishment fringe of the Republican Party and who, in the words of one admirer, was the leader of the Huns. 57 at the time, he was 5 months older than Cornyn, but his dark hair, lean build, and more casual aw-shucks style made him appear years younger. Before his election to Congress, DeMint had run an advertising agency in South Carolina. He understood how to sell, and what he was pitching that night was an approach to politics that, according to the historian Sean Willits, would have been recognizable to DeMint's forebearers in the Palmetto State as akin to the radical nullification of federal power advocated in the 1860s by the Confederate secessionist John C. Calhoun. The two Republican senators had been at loggerheads for some time. That night, they gave opposing opening statements. Cornyn spoke in favor of the Republican Party fighting its way back to victory by broadening its appeal to a wider swath of voters, including moderates. In contrast, DeMint portrayed compromise as surrender. He had little patience for the slow-moving process of constitutional government. He regarded many of his Senate colleagues as timid and self-serving. The federal government posed such a dire threat to the dynamism of the American economy, in his view, that anything less than all-out war on regulations and spending was a cop-out. DeMint was the face of a new kind of extremism, and he spoke that evening in favor of purifying rather than diluting the Republican Party. He argued that he would rather have 30 Republicans who believed in something than a majority who believed in nothing, a line that was a mantra for him and that brought cheers and applause from the gathered onlookers. Rather than compromising their principles and working with the new administration, the Obama administration, DeMint argued, Republicans needed to take a firm stand against Obama, waging a campaign of massive resistance and obstruction regardless of the 2008 election outcome. Then they go through a discussion about how they debated, the TARP, and DeMint had voted against it, Cornyn for it, and, some of the just issue things. Sitting silently at a table in the front row through all this were Charles Koch and his wife, Liz. No one came to Cornyn's defense. It was widely assumed that the Kochs, as hardcore free market enthusiasts, had opposed the huge government bailouts of the private sector. Later, many reporters assumed this too, ascribing the Kochs' opposition to Obama as stemming from a principled disagreement over issues such as the TARP bailouts. But none of this was true. Had people checked the records, they would have found it quite revealing. At first, the Kochs political organization, Americans for Prosperity, had in fact taken what appeared to be a principled libertarian position against the bank bailouts. But the organization quickly and quietly reversed sides when the bottom began to fall out of the stock market, threatening the Kochs' own vast investment portfolio. The market had begun to collapse on Monday, September 29, when, in the face of heavy opposition from conservatives, the House unexpectedly failed to pass a federal rescue plan. By the end of the day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had fallen 777 points, losing 6.9% of its value. It was the stock market's largest one-day drop ever. Although some conservative groups and politicians such as DeMint still opposed the bailout, the market panic was enough to change many minds. And among those who flipped during the next 48 hours were the Kochs. But if the Kochs' personal interest in protecting their portfolio had trumped their free market principles, they weren't about to mention it in front of a group full of libertarians whose cash they wanted to combat Obama. Instead, the sentiment among the donors, as the first Koch seminar of the Obama era came to an end, was, as one witness put it, like a bunch of gorillas beating their chests. After hearing both sides out, the assembled guests chose the path of extremism. The Kochs had already concluded that they would need to resort to extraordinary political measures to achieve their goals. A few days before the January 2009 donor seminar, Charles and David Koch had privately weighed their options with their longtime political strategist in a meeting inside the black glass fortress that served as Koch Industries' corporate headquarters in Wichita, Kansas. Advisors to Obama later acknowledged he had no inkling of what he was up against. He had campaigned as a partisan politician who had idealistically taken issue with those who liked to slice and dice our country into red and blue states. His vision, like his own racial blend and geographic heredity, was one of reconciliation, not division. The sentiment was laudable, but alas, wishful thinking. The newly sworn-in president looked down at the ground directly beneath his polished shoes, the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and James in Utah, Alabama. Am I saying that right, James?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
I was telling you, Screener, I drive a truck. I'm retired military, and I hear you talking about all these solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tomorrow I'm going to Macon, Georgia, and I'll be going back through Alabama. And there's 2 farms out here, about 500 acres, that's got solar panels on. And me and another truck driver was talking about one day, you know, what you going to do if they keep buying this land up and there ain't going to be no more farmers, there ain't going to be no more food.
Yeah.
Because that land right there where he had those solar panels, I mean, as far as you can see, is solar panels.
Oh, really? So he's got a solar farm, basically. He's harvesting sunlight rather than growing soybeans.
It's about 500 acres of it. And
wow.
He said, you know, people, I don't know where you're from, but, you know, the Northeast gets all their food from the South and Midwest.
Yeah.
And they coming down here and giving these farmers big money, and they just taking the money, and eventually one day, who's going to be growing the food?
Yeah, that's a damn good question, James. We've got so much space in the United States that is not growing food that we could be putting solar panels on, and this is what Germany did. They worked out a deal where they said to the banks, if you will loan money to homeowners, if you'll extend a mortgage to them to pay for solar panels for their roofs and, you know, batteries and inverters and all that stuff, all the stuff necessary to hook them up to the grid and make it all work. If you will loan them that over a 10-year period at 2% interest, we will guarantee those loans. So you take no risk. You are guaranteed a 2% profit. So the bank said, okay, that's cool. Then they said to the utility, you want to build a nuclear power plant, but the nuclear power plant is going to cost, you know, X billion, say $6 billion or something like that. And so if instead of taking that money and putting it into the nuclear power plant, take that money and buy electricity from people who have solar panels on their roofs for 7 times the retail price. In other words, you're selling it for 7 cents a kilowatt, buy it for 49 cents a kilowatt, right, from these people. Because that, when you do the math, at the end of the year, the utility companies would have been paying, or actually I think it's you know, a big national German publicly owned utility, but whatever, it would have been paying the exact same amount of money to build that nuclear power plant. But now they've got the same capacity in terms of electricity generation as a nuclear power plant, because Germany made this big commitment after Chernobyl to denuclearize their power sector. And so it was insanely successful. You know, they generated within the first 10 years enough power to replace 10 or 11 nuclear power plants instead of just the one that was their goal. And because so many people did this, and it didn't require any farmland. It just, I mean, you take a train across Germany. I did last year. Take a train from east to west, where you're looking north and south out the windows, and you look out the north-facing windows at the south-facing rooftops all along that train ride. And you just see, you know, every other home, it seems, is covered with solar panels. And then they said to the consumers, you know, you're going to make extra money from selling your electricity back to the utility only for the first 10 years. And that extra money that you're going to make selling it back to the utility is equal to your mortgage payment. And so you're getting the solar panels for free. The utility is getting electricity ultimately for free. That is to say, less than the cost of building a nuclear power plant. And 10 years after this is all done, the solar panels are paid off. They've got 50-year lifespans. The utility company is no longer buying at a premium. They're buying at the same retail price that they're selling at it. So it's as if suddenly the power companies and the consumers got free electricity. Now, this is, you know, it's a very kind of, well thought out plan, but it's not rocket science. We could be doing this in the United States. We've got buildings, public buildings all over the country. The federal government, there was talk about doing this during the Obama administration. In fact, this is one of the things that Van Jones was talking about when he was on President Obama's team as the Green Czar, was basically replicating that here in the United States and taking all the federal buildings, which have to occupy square miles, you know, probably hundreds of square miles, and on the roofs of those federal buildings put solar panels. Why don't we offer a a tax incentive to for-profit businesses to put solar panels on the top of buildings? Offer it to contractors, people like Donald Trump, developers. I mean, there's so much we can do without covering up 500 acres of soybean fields. And so, James, I get what you're saying. And if the utilities were not fighting this, if they were not obstructing this, if the Republicans were not obstructing this, there's so much we could do, so much power we could get from that giant fusion nuclear reactor 93 million miles away from us that we call the sun. I mean, it's just amazing. James, thanks. That's a great point. I appreciate the call. Rob in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Mr. Hartman. Yeah, I was just talking about the kind of the way to get around that net metering.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, see, I live in Arizona, and it's kind of ridiculous that they're fighting in here too.
Yes, I know.
To me, it's like, why don't they just have programs that allow people to get, basically some breaks on getting the battery packs? You get the battery packs, you store your 6 or 8 hours, during the day. You get home, you use up your energy completely off the grid, and then when you run out, you just switch cleanly over.
Right.
That would get rid of that whole net metering argument. I mean, it's a stupid argument to start with, but at least that would get the utilities to shut up about using their power lines.
Well, ultimately, I think that's probably where we're going to end up. If not individual home electricity, at least community electricity. At the level of the city block or the 5 city blocks, where you'll have a little small substation. But there is an advantage to having people all tied together and, balancing the load, essentially, sort of like insurance. It's those in need get it from those who have a surplus. And then when those who have a surplus are in need, they get it from everybody else. So, it can work that way. And it just seems like a fairly straightforward thing. But the utilities are working off this model of we generate a product at a central location and we sell it to you, even though 17% of all the electricity in the United States is lost through long lines, transmission lines, through line losses. This is our model. We're manufacturing electricity and selling it out there into the marketplace, and particularly in Phoenix, where you are, it seems like you could so easily have all these households connected to a not-for-profit grid, a smart grid that allocates load. And you particularly need load allocation when you've got things like industry, hospitals, retail, the big things that consume a lot of electricity as part of that grid. So everybody benefits from the kind of balancing out of it. And, in Denmark, for example, we did our show from Denmark, from Danish radio studios a couple back, must have been 5-6 years ago. And I had on one of the legislators who had put this program into place. They put a program into place, and I'm not sure the status of it right now because they were just starting it when we were there, where the country was going to backstop a manufacturer, provide incentives to an electric car manufacturer. And the way it was going to work, because the situation that they had was they were generating about 1/3 of their power through windmills, in the Copenhagen harbor and all around the oceans and whatnot. But it wasn't everything that they needed. And the problem they had was they had high demand for electricity during the day and very low demand at night, but the windmills were generating electricity 24/7. So what do you do with that wasted electricity at night? They couldn't buy enough batteries, and they didn't have, like Norway actually pumps it up into fjords and then lets it come down running turbines on the way down during demand time. That's how they store electricity in Norway. But what Finland, the idea that they came up with is get everybody in the country with an electric car. The electric car charges overnight. We sell electricity to them at, say, $0.01 a kilowatt hour at night when there's no demand. So your car charges fully up at night. Then in the morning, you got a car at 100%. You drive to work. It's now at, say, 95%. At work, you plug your car into the grid and you sell the power from your battery back to the electric company during the day, which is peak demand time. You sell your electricity back during the day for, say, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And then at night, when you drive home, your battery is down to, say, 30-40% charge, plenty to drive home with. You drive home and you charge it up again with cheap electricity. And that way, they envisioned 5 million electric cars being basically the battery storage system for their grid, and every consumer participating in this. I mean, there's so many brilliant solutions for this. Does that make sense, Rob?
And yes, and the thing you said brilliantly earlier, which just I'm going to be using this a lot, is if you have to use it for eminent domain, then it is part of the commons.
Yeah.
Basically, if you have to take it for the people, then it should be regulated by the government. But if you have to take it from the people for a corporation, there's where the line's drawn.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing.
Amen. Amen. Rob, thanks a lot for the call. And thanks for listening to us there in Phoenix. We'll be back. Bob Ney is going to be with us with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes. And stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with Talk Media News right after this. Welcome back. Linda in River Falls, Wisconsin, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind?
Yes, thank you, Tom. It's really weird because you've been in my living room for years now, and this is the first time I've spoken back to you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I have a concern. I'm really worried about the 2018 elections and the Democratic Party. It seems to me that since Bernie, whom I worked very hard for, that I've been becoming really estranged from the Democratic Party per se, and I've been so turned off that I've been contributing only directly to candidates running for office rather than to the DNC or any other national organization, and I work, personally, with candidates in local elections, but I can't stand the party, and I feel like they're kind of like telling us how bad Trump is, and they're going after white swing voters, and they're not realizing that we're in a, I guess like Steve Phillips says in Brown is the New White, he talks about a demographic revolution, and that we're having so many more progressive people of color and progressive Caucasian people. Do you think that Keith Ellison and Perez are going to be able to turn this around? I'm a Latina, and when I talk to other people of color, it kind of scares me that there's a lot of folks that didn't even vote in the last election because they were so turned off. I don't want to hear anymore how bad Trump is. I want to know what the people are going to do, what corrective measures they're going to take for the common good and for all of us. I'm not talking identity politics, but I'm just feeling like the Democratic Party doesn't get us.
Yeah. I think that, the Democratic Party is factionalized. There is the corporate faction, which used to be called Republicans, Eisenhower Republicans, and now they're called DLC Democrats. And there is the old-fashioned Democratic Party wing, which used to be called Democrats, Roosevelt Democrats, right? And that struggle inside the Democratic Party is going to play out for a while because, Bill Clinton and Al Fromm deeply embedded the corporate powers into the Democratic Party. So, the party has a problem at that level. But rather than you and I, Linda, and others sitting around engaging in basically the Democratic Party version of Kremlinology, trying to figure out what's going on back behind those walls where we can't see what's going on, rather than that, I would say that what we need to be doing is getting inside and taking over. We need to get inside the Democratic Party. We need to be running progressive candidates. I think your position of only contributing money to individual candidates is probably wise. Not that I'm not advocating not helping fund the DNC, but individual candidates. When the DNC notices that people like Iron Stash, Randy Bryce, who was on yesterday, when in Wisconsin, when they notice that these people, or as we saw with John Ossoff down in Georgia, that they're raising millions of dollars from individual donors, and they're not taking corporate money. I think that is the kind of wake-up call that's really important. But most important is we need people, Linda, you may not be inclined to do it, but maybe you know somebody who is. Maybe you have friends, family. We need to get inside the Democratic Party and take this thing over at the local level. So those are my thoughts. Linda, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. And on the line with us is our old friend, the author of Sideswiped, Bob Ney. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I'm loving what I do.
Okay, good. Me too, as a matter of fact. So tell us what's going on in the world today.
Sure. I was just listening to the last caller and talking about the elections 2018. I just wanted to note a report came out today that the Republican National Committee has raised $75 million in a 6-month period, which was double the amount when President Obama came off of his first 6 months for the Democratic National Committee. So,
yeah, on the other hand, President Obama did not declare his presidency for 4 years down the road the day that he was inaugurated, like Donald Trump did.
Right, correct. And so I wanted to just say the money race, I think, is on. But still, there's organization and candidates issues and things like that. But I did want to mention that came out today. The lead story we've been running today is about the United States weighing trade measures against China. And I just wanted to kind of put a little twist into the story. The two measures, of course, Tom, that President Trump has come out with are one is intellectual property rights, and the second is interference in American businesses by the Chinese government. Now, both of these are very legitimate issues. In fact, you remember the late Congressman Tom Lantos of California.
I do.
I was in China with him when President Clinton was president in 1996, and those two issues I just mentioned were discussed in China back in 1996. They're still discussed in 2017. So, they're legitimate issues. However, with North Korea, I think is the twist to this. And the reason I mention that is because the Chinese government is, I think, in my opinion, fairly manipulative and almost Machiavellian in how it plays a chess game.
Yeah, they didn't get to where they are by playing ping pong.
That's right. You've got it. And so President Trump's coming out with this because, as you know, the president likes to put everything out there instantly on Twitter and what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. And a lot of times there's back channel ways to do it, such as Tillerson's trying to do with North Korea and Secretary of State Tillerson's tried to do with Iran, which angered the president. But I think that the Chinese at some point in time, because there's only 3 possible things that can happen on North Korea, are going to look at this growing list of things that Donald Trump mentions that I think are good things, but they're going to play a game with it. And if we want them really to do something about North Korea, they will probably ask to whittle away at some of those. And why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because can Donald Trump do that and then hold to what he had promised, especially in the, labor states who want to see, a lot of changes in the trade issues. So a lot of these ideas he has may be traded away, literally.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Right, with North Korea.
So watch this space.
Right, I did want to mention that. And then the other news today that's making the rounds, obviously, is Attorney General Sessions and reopening the case, of course, about college admissions and affirmative action in college admissions. And, this was decided by the United States Supreme Court, if my memory serves me right, about a year ago.
Yeah, it looks to me like this is part of Trump's campaign to restore white privilege to its previous status.
Right. I don't think they can win this. I don't think that's the issue.
No, they're trying to stir up the base, the white angry base.
Because last year this issue was decided, like I said, by the Supreme Court, because they've also instituted something that President Obama put on freeze. Have you talked about the confiscation issues at all?
I have not. Well, not today anyway. We've talked about how Sessions is saying, yeah, go ahead and steal things. Yeah, the number that boggled my mind was that 2 years ago, I don't think we have last year's numbers, but in 2015, $3.3 billion worth of stuff and money was taken from American citizens by police. $3.3 billion was taken from American citizens who had not been convicted of any crime whatsoever. And in the meantime, burglars in the United States only took $3 billion. The government took more than the burglars.
Right, and people were stopped for a traffic, a light out on the back of their car, and all of a sudden, things are confiscated. So obviously, there was abuse. President Obama had put a freeze on it. And again, I don't know, the Justice Department says under Sessions, well, they're going to have certain limited things and use it in certain cases. But, frankly, I think once again, it's a policy that won't be able to legally hold up. However, I don't think that matters to Sessions. I found the admissions issue, though, quite interesting, especially with Sessions' history on racial issues. I thought that was a very touchy subject,
Yeah, well, this seems to me like they're just trying to go back to the culture wars. I mean, this started in the '80s in a big way. This whole anti-affirmative action stuff. There was blowback in the '60s when affirmative action was first rolled out, as I recall. I could correct my timeline if I'm wrong on this.
Right.
Right. But yeah.
And it's not affirmative action. I used to, by the way, Governor Rose of Ohio years ago. He gave me a job as a EEO. Opportunity Affirmative Action investigator on construction companies. Yes, so I worked it. We made it clear at that time these aren't quotas. We want affirmative action. It's not some quota system. That was way back in.
Take some positive steps to increase minority representation in your organization. Right. At least up to close to the threshold of the percentage of minorities in the population.
Right, and of course, health care.
Yeah.
I think that Lamar Alexander, a senator from Tennessee, is trying to save Mitch McConnell from himself.
Oh, really? How?
Heck, I do. Look, Mitch McConnell wanted one thing by what he started with the health care. He wanted tax breaks for the wealthy of the wealthiest, right? He wanted it. He would have done a piece of legislation, went into the Conference Committee, because I've been on the Conference Committee with Mitch McConnell, with the Help America Vote Act, Steny Hoyer and I, Mitch McConnell, Ted Kennedy. And Mitch McConnell wants one or two things, and he whittles away till he gets parts of the things he wants, which is what he wanted. I don't think he cared how the rest of the bill went. And, of course, that went by the wayside, so his comment is, well, we're moving on. Well, moving on to what? Tax relief that he, tax breaks he can't get, but he's going to move on. And I think that with Lamar Alexander, first of all, forming this alliance with Democratic members also is a good public policy substance issue where they can.
This is with regard to health care or tax?
Yes.
With regard to health care.
With regard to health care.
Okay.
Health care. So I think it's a good public policy venue, don't get me wrong. But in all reality, I think Lamar Alexander is, again, saving Mitch McConnell from himself, because if Mitch McConnell believes after 7 years of a mantra of repeal, 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 then the new mantra of repeal and replace, and then nothing, it would damage McConnell, and it would damage the Republicans in the Senate quite a lot. So I think Lamar Alexander is trying to save him from himself. I'm sure McConnell doesn't like that.
Right.
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah. They'll name it the repeal and replace bill. I predict
President Trump will sign anything.
Yeah, even though what it's doing is it's making Obamacare work. I'm with you. Exactly. Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Good talking with you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. From
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Donut Economics, brand new book by Kate Raworth, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And on page 21 in the Who Wants to Be an Economist chapter, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, here they are. Whether you consider yourself an economic veteran or novice, now is the time to uncover the economic graffiti that lingers in all of our minds. And if you don't like what you find, scrub it out, or better still, paint it over with new images that far better serve our needs and times. The rest of this book proposes 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist, revealing for each of those 7 ways the spurious image that has occupied our minds, how it has come to be so powerful, and the damaging influence it has had. But the time for mere critique is past, which is why the focus here is on creating new images that capture the essential principles to guide us now. The diagrams in this book aim to summarize that leap from old to new economic thinking. Taken together, they set out, quite literally, a new big picture for the 21st century economist. So here's a whirlwind tour of the ideas and images at the heart of donut economics. First, change the goal. For over 70 years, economics has been fixated on GDP, or national output, as its primary measure of progress. That fixation has been used to justify extreme inequalities of income and wealth, coupled with unprecedented destruction of the living world. For the 21st century, a far bigger goal is needed, meeting the human needs of every person within the means of our life-giving planet. And that goal is encapsulated in the concept of the donut. The challenge now is to create economies, local to global, that help to bring all of humanity into the donut's safe and just space. Instead of pursuing ever-increasing GDP, it's time to discover how to thrive in balance. Second, see the big picture. Mainstream economics depicts the whole economy with just one extremely limited image, the circular flow diagram. Its limitations have furthermore been used to reinforce a neoliberal narrative about the efficiency of the market, the incompetence of the state, the domesticity of the household, and the tragedy of the commons. It is time to draw the economy anew, embedding it within society and within nature and powered by the sun. This new depiction invites new narratives about the power of the market, the partnership of the state, the core role of the household, and the creativity of the commons. Third, nurture human nature. At the heart of 20th century economics stands the portrait of rational economic man. He has told us that we are self-interested, isolated, calculating, fixed in taste, and dominant over nature. And his portrait has shaped who we have become. But human nature is far richer than this. As early sketches of our new self-portrait reveal, we are social, interdependent, approximating, fluid in values, and dependent upon the living world. What's more, it is indeed possible to nurture human nature in ways that give us a far greater chance of getting into the donut's safe and just space. Fourth, get savvy with systems. The ironic crisscross of the market supply and demand curves is the first diagram that every economics student encounters, but it is rooted in misplaced 19th century metaphors of mechanical equilibrium. A far smarter starting point for understanding the economy's dynamism is systems thinking, summed up by a simple pair of feedback loops. Putting such dynamics at the heart of economics opens up many new insights, from the boom and bust of financial markets to the self-reinforcing nature of economic inequality and the tipping points of climate change. It's time to stop searching for the economy's elusive control levers and start rewarding it as an ever-evolving, complex system. Fifth, design to distribute. In the 20th century, one simple curve, the Kuznets curve, whispered a powerful message on inequality. It has to get worse before it can get better, and growth will eventually make it up, or even it up. But inequality, it turns out, is not an economic necessity. It is a design failure. 21st century economists will recognize that there are many ways to design economies to be far more distributive of the value that they generate, an idea best represented as a network of flows. It means that going beyond redistributing income to exploring ways to redistributing wealth, particularly the wealth that lies in controlling land, enterprise, technology, knowledge, and the power to create money. Sixth, create to regenerate. Economic theory has long portrayed a clean environment as a luxury good, affordable only for the well-off. This view was reinforced by the environmental Kuznets curve, which once again whispered that pollution has to get worse before it can get better and growth will eventually clean it up. But there is no such law. Ecological degradation is simply the result of degenerative industrial design. This century needs economic thinking that unleashes regenerative design in order to create a circular, not linear, economy and to restore humans as full participants to Earth's cyclical processes of life. Today, seventh, be agnostic about growth. One diagram in economic theory is so dangerous that it's actually never drawn, the long-term path of GDP growth. Mainstream economics views endless economic growth as a must, but nothing in nature grows forever, and the attempt to buck that trend is raising tough questions in high-income but low-growth countries. The book, Donut Economics.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And I just want to go through some of the news that's out there today for a few minutes, and then we'll pick up your phone calls and kind of continue. Mark Sumner wrote a great piece over at Daily Kos today. The headline, I referenced this in my conversation with Bob Ney about 10, 15 minutes ago, but the headline, Trump and Jeff Sessions, turn Civil Rights Division, that would be the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which is charged with enforcing civil rights laws, into a weapon to protect white privilege. And the article says the Trump administration is preparing to redirect resources to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division toward investigating and suing universities over affirmative action admission policies deemed to discriminate against white applicants, according to a document obtained by the New York Times. And so, yeah, it's they're going to start suing schools, that are doing what the Supreme Court said you can do, and you should do, in fact, is, try to have a diverse campus. It's good for everybody. But no. Make America white again. It was just a typo, right, in his slogan. Should have been M-A-W-A, MAWA. Make America white. I mean, this is what it's all about. Jason Wilson, day before yesterday, wrote a piece in The Guardian titled, Young White Guys Are Hopping Mad, Confidence Grows at Far-Right Gathering. This was the so-called American Renaissance Conference that was held in Tennessee over the weekend, and calling for race realism and a white ethno-state within the United States. This is very, very spooky stuff, but it is going mainstream. He's talking about this American Renaissance. These are white nationalists, white supremacists. And this weekend, American Renaissance held its annual conference in Montgomery Bell State Park, hour west of Nashville. Attendees and speakers clearly felt a growing confidence. They've seen appreciable growth in membership of established and emerging far-right groups. They've also seen the election as president of Donald Trump. Some of the topics, race realism and race denial, as the white man turned the corner, the Trump report card so far. Many were millennials. This is disturbing. Though all attendees wore conference dress code, jacket, and tie, more than a few younger men sported the fasci haircut, as in fascist, short back and sides with a severe parting, which has become a signature of the so-called alt-right. Many such young men lined up for selfies with Richard Spencer, the president of the White Nationalist National Policy Institute think tank, who has achieved fame since greeting the election results with a cry of Hail Trump. And I would add he did the Hitler salute. So there's that. Meanwhile, in India, this from Quartz, India, by Devyot Ghoshal. This is from a newspaper out of India. 59,000 Indian farmers have killed themselves due to rising temperatures, and it could get worse. And this is about farmers across India protesting, almost always clad in green, sometimes holding human skulls or dead rats. They've been attempting to lobby the Modi government for a relief package, including a farm loan waiver. One of the protest leaders said, due to a water crisis and drought, farmers are under a huge financial burden. We are almost destroyed. We don't care if we die protesting here. And then they, in the last 3 decades alone, rising temperatures and their impact on crop yields have been responsible for an estimated 59,000 farmer suicides, according to a new study by Tama A. Carrollton, a researcher at the UC Berkeley. So that's 60,000 people over 30 years. It's roughly 20,000 people a year committing, farmers in India committing suicide because climate change is wiping out their ability to raise crops and things. Donald Trump reportedly told one of his golfing buddies at whichever Trump-owned golf course he was at last weekend or the weekend before, we spend millions and millions of dollars to transport the president to his properties so he can advertise them and raise their value on our nickel. And he said the White House is a dump. Well, yeah, the White House was built in 1800, 1801, something like that. I mean, it was very early on. I think maybe might have been late 1790s. I think John Adams lived there for a short time. Jefferson then moved in and whatnot. But George Washington didn't live in the White House. It was being built during that time. And in fact, our first capital was New York and then Philadelphia, or maybe it was the other way around. And then we ended up with D.C. But Donald Trump talking about what a dump the White House is. So he has to get away from it on the weekends to go to his palaces, right? How disgusting is this? Let me quote to you from a handwritten essay that Barack Obama wrote on the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address when he was living in the White House. And I'm quoting from the President Obama. In the evening, when Michelle and the girls have gone to bed, I sometimes walk down the hall to a room Abraham Lincoln used as his office. It contains an original copy of the Gettysburg Address written in Lincoln's own hand. I linger on these few words that help define our American experiment. Quote, a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, end quote. Through the lines of weariness etched on his face, we know Lincoln grasped, perhaps more than anyone, the burdens required to give these words meaning. He knew that even a self-evident truth was not self-executing. The blood drawn by the lash was an affront to our ideals. The blood drawn by the sword was in painful service to those same ideals. He understood as well that our humble efforts, our individual ambitions are ultimately not what matter. Rather, it is through the accumulated toil and sacrifice of ordinary men and women, like those like the soldiers who consecrated that battlefield, that this country is built and freedom preserved. This quintessentially self-made man, talking about Lincoln, fierce in his belief in honest work and the striving spirit at the heart of America, believed that it falls to each generation collectively to share in that toil and sacrifice. Now, to the best of my knowledge, nobody in the Trump family has ever, Obama continues, has ever served in the military. Obama continues, through Cold War and World War, through industrial revolutions and technological transformations, through movements for civil rights and women's rights and workers' rights and gay rights, we have shared in that sacrifice. At times, social and economic change have strained our union. But Lincoln's words give us confidence that whatever trial awaits us, this nation and the freedom we cherish can and shall prevail. Trump, the White House is a dump. Obama, I'm walking these sacred halls inspired by Abraham Lincoln. Amazing. Rex Tillerson, I'll just the headline. I mean, as Trump is trying to, apparently, there's an op-ed about this in today's New York Times, about how deadly dangerous Trump's attempts to destroy the Iran deal simply because he wants to blow up any legacy of President Obama. He wants to wipe President Obama from the face of the earth, right? It just, no memory. The Republicans, by the way, did essentially the same thing to Jimmy Carter during the Reagan administration. It just wasn't quite as explicit, and it didn't have the racial tone to it. But while Trump is trying to stir up war with North Korea, Rex Tillerson, U.S. Secretary, this is Katrina Manson writing in the Financial Times. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson used his lengthiest enunciation of U.S. foreign policy yet to reassure Kim Jong-un that the U.S. is not seeking to topple North Korea's supreme leader or his regime, and that Washington would like to sit down for talks. That's amazing. Rex Tillerson, maybe he's going to become a statesman. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The only problem he has is that guy in the White House. We'll be back with you, Paul. And welcome back, Lee in Tamarack, Florida. Hey, Lee, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. So good to talk to you. I'm on Free Speech, also RT. I catch you. You're not on Link, though, I don't think.
No, we're not.
Another excellent network, though.
Yep.
I'll start off by saying I think we should repeal and replace our government. But I thought that when they swore Donald in. I reside on the edge of the Everglades in Tamarack, Florida. About a quarter of a mile down the road is the other side of the Sawgrass Expressway is the Everglades. And we've been concerned about the fracking problem. And last night, our distinguished Senator Bill Nelson had a call-in, town hall type call-in meeting about the environment. And I was on the queue, and I got early into the queue. And my question was this, that the Broward County, where I live, passed a regulation that the area of the Everglades should not have fracking. There should be no fracking.
Right.
And I'm very concerned about fracking because I think it's a terrible thing and they should not allow it. But in any event, that was my question for Senator Nelson. I even though I got in early on the queue, somehow or other I never got to ask my question.
Isn't most of Florida basically limestone? I mean, isn't Florida, or am I just thinking of the Keys and the coast, or something?
Well, I don't know about it being limestone. Where I am in Tamarack, you can't dig down too deep before you hit water.
Because you hit water, yeah. So I would think that, I mean, fracking is typically only works when you've got shale, way down there. And is there shale anywhere in Florida? I mean, are they fracking in Florida?
I heard that they wanted to do some fracking in the Everglades,
right?
And in the swamps of the Everglades, and that the whatever particular county jurisdiction covered it. In the case of Broward, for example, we covered a good section of the southern area of the Everglades. Mm-hmm. Within our county line. We passed a county regulation that they will not allow it. I don't know about Palm Beach or Monroe or any of the other counties that are on the Everglades, but right. I do know that these companies that do want to do the fracking did come in and try to do something like that. And we were really upset by it, and I was disappointed that my question never got into the senator.
Yeah, Bill Nelson's a Democrat, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a Democrat. Bill Nelson's a Democrat, not a Bernie Sanders type Democrat.
Yeah, but he's still a Democrat. I mean, he's yeah.
But well, incidentally, by the way, we had you were talking about solar before. My wife and I were a very strong advocates of solar. As far as I'm concerned, Florida. What is the name of our state? The Sunshine State.
Right.
Shouldn't be solar generators on every house in the state.
Oh yeah. Well, anything south of the Mason-Dixon line, that's true.
That's right. so we were out. My wife and I were out with a petition to get the solar to allow the solar to be okay for people to put on their houses without having to cut in the.
And real quickly, what happened?
Yeah, well, FPL, our distinguished power company, got people out signing their own petitions.
Oh, no. That's incredible. Lee, we're out of time. Thank you. We'll be
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Welcome back. John in Hillman, Michigan. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I was calling because I heard your debate on the power generation and the eminent domain of that, but I want to take that eminent healthcare, where the people should be able to. We need to buy out the healthcare from the so that we can have for all in this country, and which would create the Republicans' debate on the corporate tax break, because that's what insurance is just a big, huge tax on everybody.
Yeah.
And it's very expensive. So if we were able to, I don't know why that's not.
I agree with you, John. Your phone is breaking up, so about every third word is vanishing. But I'm pretty sure I got the gist of what you're saying, and I agree that. And in fact, if you read the text of H.R. 676, John Conyers' health care bill that gets perennially introduced into Congress, the most recent version of it, I'm not sure about earlier ones, but this year's version actually has provisions to let the insurance companies down softly and provide for their employees. Whereas, I'm more inclined to simply say, okay, you guys had a good run, see you later. But, buying out the insurance companies, we could do that for probably a couple $100 billion. I don't know what the insurance companies are worth right now. If they knew the single payer was coming, their value would probably drop dramatically. But, healthcare, in my opinion, should be a public utility, just like, not the actual providing of the health care. If an individual doctor wants to run his office on a for-profit basis, I have no problem with that. But the payment system, you're right. The insurance companies, they're basically just banksters. All they do is handle money. So sure, absolutely. John, thank you for the call. Sandy in Hammondsport, New York. Hey, Sandy, what's on your mind today? Sandy? Oh, Sandy, you got to listen to your phone, not your radio or TV or whatever it is. Jory in Pueblo, Colorado. Hey, Jory, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm really troubled right now because I know that we're all focused on healthcare and, like a lot of the chaos that's going on inside the Trump White House right now. But I feel like a lot of people aren't paying attention to these Russian sanctions that just flew through the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And they're also not paying attention to the implications by our European brothers and sisters who are our closest allies around the world. Germany's getting really, really, really upset about this.
Right, because they get so much natural gas and oil from Russia.
Right. Well, they're upset because we're essentially bringing sanctions against Russia based off of the allegations of a private corporation, CrowdStrike, because the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, they've never even seen the DNC servers to confirm that it was a Russian hack. So right at this point, we're essentially sanctioning a sovereign country based on the word of a private organization that always does the IT work for the DNC.
Right.
So I can understand why Germany's really, really upset about this.
Yeah, I can too. I'm frankly, the sanctions against Russia can be, well, Trump can't reverse them, but Congress can. And, there may be some space in there for motion. The sanctions that freak me out are the sanctions against Iran. And because I see this as the first step toward, the Republican dream of destroying anything President Obama has his fingerprints on, which includes the Iran deal. And I think that war with Iran would be the absolute worst thing we could do. It would be, for the United States to go against Iran would be the equivalent of Hitler's decision to invade, Russia, in, what was it, 43, 44, whatever year it was that he invaded Russia and just, bit off more than he could chew. Iran is a sophisticated, developed, powerful, large nation in the center of everything with a lot of allies in the region, including Iraq, by the way, which we handed over to Iran by taking out Saddam Hussein. And with regard to North Korea, I mean, Rex Tillerson's in the middle of trying to negotiate something with China and North Korea, and Congress is inserting itself. It seems to me like this is a dangerous step. But on the other hand, who knows? I mean, I haven't read the bill, and I'm not in the middle of the negotiations, and I don't get the security briefings. So there may be something there I'm missing. Jory, thanks for the call. Chris in Rosedale, Maryland. Chris, we got a minute to the break. What's up?
Hi. Hold on. I got to turn my sound off on my YouTube. Okay. So I'm calling you, and I'm basically asking why our congressman and I have submitted a letter to my congressman, and I want to know why we haven't even considered the idea of proposing a bill that clearly defines the requirements of President of the United States, other than being 35, living 7 years in their state, and being a natural born citizen. I think that there must be a lot more requirements than for instance, driving a car.
Being able to pass a security background check.
Yeah, at least at the very minimum, a security background check. And I also believe that that a person who has lots and lots of money is compromised in that way because they had to do many questionable things in life in order to get more money than anybody else. They have to have many ties that could be questioned later in life, like Mr. Trump.
Well, I think that's certainly true of Donald Trump. There's probably a few rich people out there who did it ethically, but yeah. I get your point, Chris. See, the problem is the Supreme Court will knock it down and say it's not constitutional. But I understand your outrage.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts on all of the above after this break. Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Cracking the Code, How to Win Hearts, Change Minds, and Restore America's Original Vision. This is from the introduction, page 1. My wife Louise and I live atop 30 feet of water, 100 feet from shore, in a houseboat on a river in Portland, Oregon. Or at least we did when I wrote this book. One day, I stepped out our back door onto the floating deck that serves as our backyard and found myself confronting a very upset Canada goose. He bobbed his head up and down, lifted his wings to make his body look larger and more intimidating, and ran straight at me, hissing and trying to nip at me. Obviously, observing this behavior, my comedian friend Swami Beyondananda, Steve Behrman, who was visiting us that week, named the bird Gooselini. I had no idea why this psycho goose was attacking me, but there was no mistake that Gooselini was trying to communicate. Stay inside that house and don't come out. I got the message, but I didn't stay inside. Instead, every time I went out to water the plants on my deck, I brought a broom with me to fight off Gooselini. I found out what was going on a week later when I learned from my neighbor that a female goose had settled on her back deck just a few feet from our own and was sitting on a nest. I realized that Gooselini must have been the proud papa protecting his territory, and I stopped swatting at him with my broom. Gooselini has a lot to tell us about communication strategies. Even though he was just doing what a gander does when he wants a predator to leave, draw attention to himself and away from his mate, attack first and ask questions later, he was able to communicate the go-away part of his message to me pretty well. We all communicate all the time, even when we don't give much thought to what we are saying or how we're saying it. Because Gooselini was unable to use what we would call rational powers of persuasion, he communicated by going straight for the more primitive parts of my brain, the parts we shared as human and goose, the center of our gut feelings. First time Gooselini attacked, I backed off because he was successful in communicating an intent to harm me, which caused me to feel fear, the most primal and visceral of human emotions. The first key to unlocking the communication code is to understand that when we communicate, feeling comes first. Emotions will always trump intellect, at least in the short term. This emotive form of communication, however, ultimately didn't get Gooselini the response he wanted. On its own, the attack wasn't very persuasive. Instead of shooing me away, Gooselini made me angry. Effective communicators know how to get the response they want because they understand how to tailor a message to the person who's listening. They know the second key to unlocking the communication code is that the meaning of a communication is the response you get. Because Gooselini couldn't tell me his story, I had to imagine his story for myself. The first story I came up with was that he was simply a psycho goose trying to harm me for no reason I could understand. Second story I came up with after talking to my neighbor was the story of a dad protecting his soon-to-be hatched goslings. Both stories accurately described what was happening, but the stories led to very different endings. The psycho goose made me angry. The dad goose made me feel protective of Gooselini himself. In this book, I call such stories maps, and the world the stories describe as the territory. The third key to unlocking the communication code is, therefore, the map is not the territory. Each story captures a different piece of reality. No one story captures it all. The key to effective communication is to find the best story to use to convey your understanding of the world to the greatest number of people. In politics, we tell each other stories all the time. Think about it, politics is really nothing more than a large set of stories. The United States of America began as a story that the founders and framers told about a society that could live in harmony around the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The country was held together after the Great Depression and through a war by a story told by Franklin Roosevelt, which he called the New Deal. Ronald Reagan told a very different story, one we're still in, that he called the free market story. In Reagan's story, our corporate CEOs should run our society instead of our elected representatives because, as Reagan pointed out and probably believed, quote, the best minds are not in government. If they were, business would hire them away, end of quote from Reagan. Most of the stories we hear in the media today are scary. We're told to be afraid because the world is a bad place and people are untrustworthy. Every goose is a Gooselini without understanding why. These scary stories are profitable to our infotainment industry and to the politicians who are typically allied with the barons of the infotainment industry. There is a different story, however, in which every Gooselini is a proud papa. It is a story of a world that is interconnected and of people who are fundamentally good. This is actually the traditional American liberal story, which has been told and understood since the first telling of it during the Enlightenment by thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Locke, and Thomas Jefferson. It's the story that reaches directly back to the founding of this country. My aim with this book is to give you the tools to tell the liberal story and to tell it well. I'll show you how the process of communication is coded, actually hardwired into our brains, and help you crack that code to become a brilliant communicator. First, though, a few concepts it's important to master. Everybody wants the best outcomes, and their behavior reflects the best tools they have to achieve those outcomes. Another way of saying this is that people always make what they think are the best choices given the circumstances and the tools they have. All behavior has at its roots, the goal of a positive outcome. As a practical statement, this means that conservatives and liberals are both working toward the best world possible. And then it goes on from there. How do we differentiate this? How do we communicate this? The book is Cracking the Code. It's about the communication code.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at hartmanreport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back. Ivory in Oroville, California. Hey, Ivory, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was just wanting to ask you about how we can untwine the industrial military complex from our manufacturing right here in the United States. You know, if you look at it, a lot of things are manufactured right here in the United States for the F-35 jet fighter plane, that the new one that they're making, right? And it's costing about $1.5 trillion because there's a system that they go by. So, all right, they approve the plane, and then they have to see if everything on the plane is all right, right? And then, but what they've done is they've started manufacturing the plane before they've seen that the plane actually works.
Right. Are you talking about the F-35?
Yes, F-35.
Yeah. And not only did they do that, but they built a manufacturing facility for some part of the plane in every single congressional district in the United States. And that was how they got their $1.5 trillion.
Yes, exactly. So nobody's going to oppose this because, you know what, if they say, you know what, we're not going to manufacture this plane anymore, right? Congress says it. Then a lot of people in their districts are going to be really angry about it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, even Bernie voted for funding because it was 3,400 jobs in Vermont.
Yeah. So,
Tough one.
So how do we untangle this mess we have of the military-industrial complex right here in the United States with their manufacturing? I mean, manufacturing jobs are important, right? Yeah. But at what expense are we doing this at? Like, we're making these planes and we're spending a boatload of money on it, and we're getting almost nothing in return from it, as we've seen so far from the F-35.
Well, you know, during World War II, FDR famously said, there will be no war millionaires made by this present, by these present difficulties, I think was the phrase he used. And he appointed a senator from, where was Harry Truman born? Nebraska? Kansas? Wherever he was, somewhere out in the Midwest. Missouri, show me state, that's right. He appointed Harry Truman, who at that point in time was a senator, appointed him to be the head of the commission that was overseeing, it was investigating war profiteering. And, you know, they busted people, they fined people, they sent people to jail for war profiteering. So, extending that logic, since our military-industrial complex is huge now, and during World War II, it was simply emerging. It was just, it was a brand new thing. I would not be opposed to legislation that says that anything that the government buys, with regard to weaponry, with regard to the military, that anything that the government buys with regard to weaponry has to be manufactured in a way that does not generate more than a fixed percentage of profit. In other words, no price gouging, no cost overruns, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I like that idea in principle. In practice, I'm guessing, the military-industrial complex would figure out 16 ways to get around it, within a day. But that's the only thing I can think of, Ivory, as a way of getting these guys under control. I don't, beyond having, an explicit policy that is agreed upon from the White House throughout Congress, which is probably not going to happen in our lifetimes, that it's time to demilitarize at least somewhat the United States. We have, no country in the world has more than one aircraft carrier except the United States. China's building their second one right now. We've got, a dozen of them, something like that. We got a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've got, we spend more on the military than pretty much everybody else combined.
Yeah, and it's crazy, and if you look at it, I don't know the exact facts on this, but, I heard a thing that we're building 10 more aircraft carriers for something like $13 billion each. And this isn't for war in Iraq or anything like that. That's not effective for war in Iraq. What it is to keep a whole, I think, to keep a global grasp on the world, and.
Yeah. And it's to back up transnational corporate power, much of which is based here in the United States. Yeah, I get it, and I agree. It's a big problem, Ivory, and maybe we can all brainstorm something, but that's the best I can do. Thanks for the call. Sibylla in Greer, South Carolina. Hey, Sibylla, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
Great. I came home from the doctor, and I've got the news on, and then it goes automatically to you at 12 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So there I see Cotton, Trump, and someone who was a former CEO of a company, and they're rehauling or reviewing the immigration laws and green cards.
Right.
And part of the qualifications is that you have to speak English, you have to be a certain educational level, and have to have a certain amount of money.
Right. And you have to have skills that can be used in the American economy.
Right. And the reason they're basing this on, they did a study where half the people that have come in would have green cards. They've got good jobs. They're working. The other half are all on welfare.
Well, they're not all on welfare, but there are some. I watched the press conference this morning, and in fact, I remarked to Troy about it. We were talking about it that every now and then the Trump administration does something that's not totally crazy. Most countries on their permanent resident immigrant status or permanent resident on a path to citizenship status, which is essentially what a green card is. It's, your choice, one of the two or both. Most countries have some sort of a system to say, if you have no skills, if you have, if you're going to basically end up on welfare, you're not going to get a green card. Now, I'm listening to this, and having worked in countries where I had to get a work permit, I had to get the equivalent. I had the equivalent of a green card in Germany for a year. I had to get the equivalent of a green card in Australia in order to tour that country and give speeches. To do business in Australia. So I have some familiarity with this, and we're one of the few developed countries in the world that doesn't have a point system, or at least one that works toward the economy. The thing that I thought was missing from what I heard this morning, from what Trump and everybody else was saying about this, I guess it was Tom Cotton, was the senator who was pitching it. Was that, they were talking about 1 out of 15 green card holders actually comes into the United States with these skill set, blah, 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 blah. What they didn't mention is, and I don't know the numbers, and I wish they had mentioned it so we could all know, was that a significant portion of people who come in on green cards are like, the woman that my brother-in-law married. They're people from another country who have fallen in love with somebody in the United States, and they want to get married. And so they come to the United States, they get a green card, and they start their path to citizenship. My brother-in-law, my sister-in-law is now a U.S. citizen. But she didn't come here to work. She came here to be my brother-in-law's wife. And, there are mothers and fathers and children and aunts and uncles and grandparents who are coming to the United States on green cards as parts of families. And it seemed to me like what they were saying was they don't want to do that anymore. And that seems to me pretty brutal. That seems to me pretty cold-hearted to simply say we're only going to take green card holders. If we did it like Canada, for example, you've got to bring at least X amount of money. I think it's a couple $100,000, and you've got to employ at least 5 Canadians or something like that. I mean, there's a whole set of criteria for this, and you can check it out country by country. But those are my thoughts on that. Sibylla, I've got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's an interesting topic. It needs to be fleshed out, though. Jill in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Tom. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure. What's up?
I want to share your hope in Tillerson, but I read an article back in May in The Guardian when he was addressing his, I think it was the State Department, and, he basically said, the America First policy means decoupling U.S. foreign policy from our values, such as human rights and freedom.
Yeah, he explicitly said sometimes you have to subordinate your values to reality. Now, in his defense, Henry Kissinger said the same thing, and he invented a word, or he used a word, I don't know if he invented it or not, realpolitik, REALPOLTIK, to describe that, that you have to accept the political realities even if they're inconsistent with your values. So I'm not sure that totally disqualifies him. That's been the policy of the United States, I would argue, basically forever. I mean, Jefferson cut a treaty with George Washington, rather, cut a treaty with the Barbary pirates. So
I think you probably have a pretty good point there, because I think often our businesses are very much in it for themselves.
Yeah, there you go. I'm in favor of a rational foreign policy, and I would love to see a foreign policy that promotes our values. And I think that particularly when we've had Democratic presidents, we have had foreign policy that tries to do that, or in some cases actually does do that. But there are going to be times when we have to deal with people that we don't like and that we would not want running this country. But we still have to deal with them. We need to be negotiating with Kim Jong-un, not threatening him. We need to be working with China, Russia, name the country around the world that is being, vilified right now in our press, that you can't just ignore, these other countries and say, oh my God, they're not perfect, Well, we're not perfect either. Which is not to put us on the same moral plane as any other country, but, our foreign policy, in my opinion, needs to do both. So anyhow, Jill, thank you for the call. Ruth in Springfield, Missouri. Hey, Ruth, what's up?
Hi. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Ruth.
I recently picked up your show, and I am retired, and I watch many news programs, national and worldwide. And I heard last week, I don't know which news channel, is that a general from NASA was on TV news and said that North Korea could not reach America, but they are still showing the map of the United States where they say that New York City can be hit.
Yeah, this last missile apparently could take it about as far as Chicago. The problem is on reentry. They had a nose cone on that missile that was supposed to represent the nuclear bomb that would be put there if and when they can figure out how to do that. And that exploded on reentry. It was not able to deal with the temperatures and pressures and vibrations that occurred on reentry. So North Korea clearly has a ways to go in their work. But, that said, we should be seriously thinking about doing something to some sort of rapprochement that would downscale the tension right now between us and North Korea. Because Kim Jong-un is basically saying, this is my country, this is my regime, don't you try and take it away from me. And as long as Trump is essentially saying, I'm going to take it away from you, Kim Jong-un is going to behave like a rat in a corner, which is very dangerous. Tillerson is now saying, no, we're not going to take it away from you. Let's talk. That's a good sign.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
But I doubt they're going to give up their nukes anyway. So we'll see where this goes. Back with more of your calls. Welcome back. Let's see here. Marge, watching Free Speech TV in Espanola, New Mexico. Hey, Marge, what's on your mind today?
Great, Tom. 94-year-old American scientist, inventor of the lithium battery, John Goodenough, has come up with a better battery for electric cars, and it will take the cars 3 times further, charge in enough time for you to have breakfast, made out of earth-friendly materials, glass, and using salt water.
Yeah.
And he announced this last February. This is fantastic.
I remember.
He's in touch with 50 battery companies.
Yep.
This is fantastic.
I think
I'm not sure what that means. Do you?
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by this. I think that battery technology and electric technology, electric car technology, pretty much everything technology is on the verge of hitting basically Moore's Law. What we see with digital technology, which is that every couple of years its capacity doubles and its price drops in half. And Elon Musk is at the top of that pyramid right now. He's doing really, really well with First Solar and with Tesla. So, yeah, I'm very encouraged by that, Marge. I'm very encouraged.
I hope he's incorporating that. One more thing I want to say about fracking. You just were talking about it. According to Sandra Steingraber, PhD biologist, and referenced in her book, Raising Elijah, fracking permanently disappears potable water we're exponentially increasing our world population, but decreasing our amount of drinkable water. That's insane.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree, and you're absolutely right. Marge, thank you for the call. Andy in Chatfield, Minnesota. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how's it going, man?
Good. What's up?
Well, I wanted to call in and I wanted to talk about healthcare and retirement with you. It seems to me that we spend like 17 or 18% of our GDP on healthcare without really getting really anything substantially out of that. It'd be one thing if we, had really, really good results out of that and we had, the longest life expectancy and everything. But by comparison, we only spend 5%, like on 5% of our GDP, like on Social Security, our main retirement, disability program. What I think that the Democrats should do as a long-term, goal is to shave off a few percentage points of GDP on healthcare, get better quality out of that, and then take the savings and reallocate that to Social Security, give people a stronger public pension. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, a single-payer national health care program would save our nation probably something on the order of $1 trillion a year, and arguably more than that. If 20% of our health care dollars are basically being skimmed off the top, or at least our health insurance dollars. And using that money to shore up Social Security, or using, I would envision a package, a Great Society kind of package that bundles together Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Well, actually, if we go with a single-payer system, you can get rid of Medicare. Paul Ryan will be very happy. You can get rid of Medicaid. Paul Ryan and all the Republicans will be very happy. You can get rid of all kinds of disability insurance that has to do with medical costs. And you can get rid of workman's compensation insurance. So there's all these costs that go down in addition to being able to provide health insurance at a lower cost. It's the only reason that we don't have a single-payer healthcare system in this country is because there's so much money being made off of us by these corporate oligarchs that they won't allow the politicians that they own to do it. Andy, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Don in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today? Don? Okay. Don's on line 1, Nate, if you want to check it out. Jim in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. You were talking to a guest earlier about nationalizing elections, that making any changes, getting rid of cross-check and that type of thing.
Right.
They need to nationalize the election system for congressional, senatorial, and presidential elections.
Yeah, the only problem is I'm guessing the Supreme Court would declare that unconstitutional under the 10th Amendment.
Okay, except for Section 4, Article 1, Section 4, where the second part of that sentence says, but Congress shall may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to places of choosing senators. And that was before the 17th Amendment. But in other words, Congress can make all the laws, and all they'd have to do is say this is not reviewable by the Supreme Court, and that would be the law of the land then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, actually, there have been laws passed that say that this law is not reviewable by the Supreme Court. According to Phyllis Schlafly on this program, the last time that happened was a law that what was his name? The senator from North Dakota? Tom Daschle, right, thank you. It was a farm bill that he passed that he did not want the Supreme Court to be messing with, and they just wrote it into the bill. That goes back to Article 3, Section 2, actually. Actually, Article 1, Section 4 as well. So, yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's a great idea. The problem, Jim, is getting any legislators to take this seriously. I mean, it's like we have in this country begun to just deify the Supreme Court, like they are some sort of sacred thing or something. It's crazy.
It'd have to be passed by a supermajority in Congress too. We do that.
Yeah, which is going to make it tough. Jim, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's a great topic. Tony in Stafford, Virginia. Hey, Tony, what's up?
Yeah, I want to say something about that defense contractors and defense complex. Well, years ago, when I started working in Washington, the only TV program on when I came home was Tom Snyder.
Yeah, I remember Tom Snyder.
Yeah, and this one night they were talking about welfare reform. And at the end of the show, he gave each person on the show their comments about welfare reform until the last person came along. And he said that they hadn't touched on the biggest welfare program of all, and he said it was the Defense Department.
Yeah, it's true.
And it was really the welfare system for the middle class.
Oh. Well, it's the welfare system for oligarchs, too. I mean, you got some really, really rich people making a pile of money in the Defense Department, in the defense industry, rather.
They offer a defense program, and it never dies.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent point, Tony. Thank you for calling and sharing it with us. Hugh in Las Vegas. Hey, Hugh, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm just an old-timer, so I've been around a long time. I just had a question. It just doesn't make sense. Why is there always Trump bashing, Obama bashing? To me, it's like having a prize fight, and I don't enjoy that either. But there's a winner and there's a loser. And when the winner wins, the loser says, hey, I'm going to come back and try again. But meantime, we have to work together. Whatever happened to that kind of idea?
I'm not sure that idea was ever part of America's DNA, Hugh. We've had competitive elections since John Adams.
Well, what I was getting at, though, on that thing there is, during the time, all they're doing right now, and what I see is they're spending all the taxpayers' money and they're fighting each other against different things and trying to defeat each other. So right now, rather than taking care of what the government should be taking care of, which is the American people.
Right. Well, I think what you're identifying is more the power of faction. What James Madison identified as faction in Federalist Number 10. Where he explicitly said a faction, I'm paraphrasing here, but you can read it in Federalist 10 yourself, that essentially a faction is an organized group of people who are working for their own self-interest when that self-interest is inimical, is contrary to the interests of the nation. And, excuse me, and Madison wrote this entire piece warning us about faction. Be careful of faction. Today we call faction special interests. Today we call faction lobbyists. Today we call faction, why is it that virtually every elected Republican, all but 24 elected Republicans at the federal level, will tell you that there's no such thing as climate change? It's because of faction. It's because you've got petro-billionaires and corporations aligned with them in the fossil fuel industry who are paying the way for those politicians. That's the exact faction definition that James Madison warned us about. And it's not just, fossil fuels. You find the same thing with regard to schools, textbooks. It's just the list goes on and on of the things that the factions, that these organizations, companies, trade associations, and the billionaires that they make or that they represent are buying influence in Washington, D.C. with. And it's just a terrible, terrible thing. And that, I think, is what's driving all this so-called partisanship. Hugh, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back tomorrow. It's been a great day today. Thanks so much for being with us. And don't forget, in the meantime, democracy isn't a spectator sport. No, it's definitely not. That's the whole point of demos, right? Democracy, the people. That includes you. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.